Deep in the night jungle, a tribe of savages staged a mad ritual around a blazing fire. A huge carcass was roasting right above the fire, filling the night air with an appetizing aroma. Having barely regained consciousness, Chen-Li dreamed in his sleep of a fun party in the company of beautiful girls. But the sweet illusion was instantly destroyed by the enticing smell of roasted meat. In anticipation of the long-awaited feast, the guy rushed forward at full speed. However, the harsh reality quickly knocked him off his feet, causing him to roll head over heels on the ground. Finding himself tightly bound, Chen-Li noticed with horror a scarlet system window looming in the air. Instead of beautiful maidens, shadows of fierce giants appeared before him. Two maniacal-looking savages towered over their helpless prey. With predatory grins, they stretched out their massive hands towards him. Chen-Li froze, realizing that he had found himself in the worst possible scenario. And now he found himself on the sandy shore, greedily washing away the traces of the recent horror from his face. The boy tried to catch his breath, coughing convulsively from the salt water. The cool splashes in his palms only briefly cleared his clouded mind. Chen-Li was inquisitively trying to understand how an ordinary yesterday could have brought him to this mysterious island. Could it be that fate itself decided to punish him in this way for the sins of the past? But suddenly, the disturbing thoughts were interrupted by a suspicious noise from the jungle. A strange group of savages jumped out of the thicket, filling the surrounding area with wild cries. Before the guy had time to properly assess the situation, the small native made a swift throw. The sharp bone blade cut through his cheek with a whistle, awakening a cold fury in Chen-Li's eyes. While fleeing, Chen-Li tried to talk some sense into his pursuers, hoping to defuse the situation. For a moment, it even seemed to him that the savages were falling behind and that his legs would not fail him in this race. But the sharp bone tip that pierced his side instantly knocked all the arrogance out of him. At that moment, it dawned on the boy with chilling clarity. What was happening around him was a cruel reality, not a joke. Right in front of him, a scarlet system window flashed with the first and most important task. To survive, he had to test his strength and endure a full 12 hours of hunting by savages. And the young, primitive hunter was already raising his new, devastating weapon to throw. Chen-Li rushed forward with all his might, not knowing where to go in the thickening thicket. Every moment he felt a mortal threat approaching behind his back. Horror gripped him as another attack by the savages became inevitable. A heavy blow to the neck area knocked the air out of the lungs and plunged consciousness into darkness. When Chen-Li came to, he found himself tightly bound with stalks and under the supervision of the tribe. But then a crimson display flashed, signaling the complete completion of the first task. A cheeky grin played on the guy's lips again. The chances of salvation had increased dramatically. While the savages were gathering around the fire, discussing their catch and preparing for the meal, Chen-Li stared greedily at the shining panel hanging in the air. Studying the game characteristics of his body, he finally became convinced that he had entered a world with RPG laws. The system immediately offered him the opportunity to open his well-deserved reward for survival. In the virtual space, a universal map, speech skills, and even combat weapons opened up before him. And the next moment, a huge amount of knowledge about medicine and life in the wild poured straight into his mind. Shock pierces Chen-Li's consciousness as the harsh reality of the new world hits his nerves with incredible force. The strange cries of the natives sound all around, but now the alien speech echoes in my head clearly and understandably. Assessing the scale of what is happening, Chen-Li realizes that before him lies a full-fledged open-world strategy game, where the rules are dictated by fate itself. Without wasting any time, he decides to use his first development points and take the allocated resources. A system notification confirms the purchase, and the boy feels the weight of a brand new battle axe behind his back. A powerful surge of energy makes the muscles tense, and the system give out well-deserved points toward strength. Chen-Li straightens his shoulders with a confident movement, feeling his body fill with unprecedented power. The sharp steel crunches as it tears apart the bonds, freeing the hero for the decisive step. A cheeky smile touches his lips. Just one point of the characteristic has exceeded all the wildest expectations. The local brutes emerge from the darkness, but Chen-Li's cold gaze reveals no fear. The savages, grinning like beasts, rush forward, eager to deal with the impudent stranger. But Chen-Li only smirks at their threats, ready to teach these thugs a harsh lesson. Swinging his futuristic axe, he towers majestically over his enemies, proclaiming himself their new deity. The huge brute glances at the strange weapon with distrust, trying to understand the meaning of the pompous speeches. And Chen-Li, with the same confident squint, continues to push his line, anticipating a quick victory. The savage lets out a furious lunge, ready to tear the impudent boy to pieces. The system instantly reacts to the threat, activating the crucial quest to subjugate the primitive tribe. Chen Li's face darkened. Would defeat in this fight really deprive him of the artifact he had so hard to obtain? Focusing all his will in his amber eyes, he accepts the challenge of a formidable opponent. The earth shakes from the powerful impact, but Chen Li is not going to retreat in the face of mortal danger. The formidable opponent is amazed to realize that this daring guy possesses truly remarkable strength. A blow of monstrous power shakes the air, knocking a groaning breath from Chen Li's chest. But the guy is not going to give up and puts all his remaining rage into resistance. The tension reaches its peak as their gazes and weapons collide in a deadly confrontation. A sudden, deafening crack breaks the silence. The giant's bone weapon cannot withstand the onslaught. The fragments fly in all directions, leaving the stunned enemy standing empty-handed. For a moment, an ominous silence reigns as the fallen piece of the once formidable weapon falls to the ground. The leader of the savages looked at the fragment in his hand in bewilderment, not believing his own eyes. His fellow tribesmen stand frozen in horror as they watch the humiliating end of the fight. Chen Li's insides tighten with a sense of foreboding as he sees the leader's face twisted in rage. He explodes into a wild cry of rage, accusing the guy of destroying the sacred relic. With one furious cry, the leader raises the entire pack to their feet, calling on them to wash away their shame with blood. Chen Li instantly sobers up with the realization that the crowd of savages outnumbers him by tens of times. A comical horror takes hold of the guy, forcing him to retreat from the battlefield to the jeers of the crowd. However, he is unable to escape. His path is blocked by another enraged enemy with a raised club. Chen Li whirls around to face the new threat, a cold calculation flashing in his eyes. A blinding flash of steel cuts through the air in a perfect counterstrike. The huge savage flies back with a cry of horror, defeated by the crushing attack. Standing over his fallen enemy with a heavy sigh, Chen Li wonders when this nightmare will finally end. Clenching his fists and towering over his enemies, he loudly declares that he will spare them if they get out of the way immediately. However, instead of humility or a plea for mercy, Chen Li sees only primal horror in the eyes of the savages. The tribe is seized by a mad panic, and people begin to retreat back with screams. They scatter, disappearing into the dense thicket and leaving the guy completely bewildered. Chen Li genuinely doesn't understand what caused such fear until a giant shadow materializes right behind him. At that very moment, a system window flashes before my eyes with the obligatory quest to drive away the saber-toothed tiger. Before he can comprehend the absurdity of the task, he feels the hot breath of a predator on his neck. He raises his head and comes face to face with a monster whose fangs can easily bite a man in half. Giving in to his primal instinct, Chen Li runs as fast as he can while the enraged creature chases after him. The predator lets out a deafening roar and stretches out its clawed paws, wanting to catch up with its escaping prey. The echo of a frightened cry spreads throughout the night forest, shaken by the ferocious tread of the beast. A powerful paw crashes down on the rock, and only by a miracle does Chen Li manage to dodge the fatal blow. The monster attacks with one attack after another, stubbornly refusing to let the young man go. Rocks and earth fly in all directions, turning the chaotic flight into a real hell among crumbling cliffs. The guy curses the system as he runs, because facing such a giant in battle seems like pure suicide. Another swing of the claws passes within millimeters of his face, causing him to almost lose control. Losing his balance, Chen Li falls to the ground, but he doesn't let go of his weapon until the very end. Finding himself in a critical situation, he clings to the rocky ground, frantically gathering the last of his strength. Quickly rising to his feet, he again holds the axe out in front of the growling predator. Realizing that he has no chance in a head-on collision, Chen Li decides to outsmart the beast. His gaze becomes extremely focused, and his mind begins to calculate the only winning move. Remembering that wild predators are terrified of flame, he notices smoke from his fire nearby. As a huge paw rises above his head, the boy realizes he only has one chance. Mustering all his audacity, Chen Li loudly challenges the monster into a direct confrontation. A deafening roar breaks the silence of the night, and a saber-toothed tiger rushes forward. Having forced the beast to attack blindly, he waits until the very last second for the perfect moment. Trying to perform a spectacular sliding blow under the predator's belly seems like the perfect idea. But the harsh reality turns out to be far from the action movies, and the heavy carcass simply knocks him off his feet. Having barely escaped from under the monster, Chen Li rushes away, cursing the useless movie stunts. The only way out is to break through the dense thickets and reach the saving fire as quickly as possible. But for an enraged, saber-toothed cat, centuries-old trees and stones are no obstacle at all. Looking back, the guy sees in shock how the predator is smashing everything in its path. The beast is literally on our heels, turning the forest into a pile of chips and debris. With the last of his strength, Chen-Li performs a somersault and flies straight towards the campsite in the clearing. Finding himself at the fire, he instantly assesses the situation and grabs a blazing firebrand. Without wasting a split second, the guy thrusts the improvised torch straight into the attacking beast's face. A wild cry of pain fills the air as a bright flame scorches the saber-toothed tiger's face. Stunned and blinded by the unexpected rebuff, the giant cat jumps back in fear. Now the initiative passes into the hands of Chen-Li, who confidently clutches the weapon and the burning branch. The predator's scorched eye begins to water, and for the first time, primal fear appears in his predatory gaze. Standing by the blazing fire with a torch at the ready, the boy is ready to prove to the animals who is the real boss here. Chen-Li still hoped that the wild beast would prefer to leave without causing unnecessary bloodshed. But suddenly, the guy's sensitive hearing picks up a strange, booming rumble coming from the darkness of the night. The echo of a powerful roar rolls throughout the area, causing the very earth to tremble. Chen-Li strained his nerves, trying to figure out whose footsteps were causing such an eerie vibration. Even night birds take to the skies in terror, fleeing from the approaching invisible disaster. The most dangerous predator of the taiga suddenly freezes, looking around with undisguised panic. With a pitiful, frightened squeal, the saber-toothed tiger finally loses all its arrogance. The giant cat tucks its tail between its legs and dashes away, abandoning its potential prey. Chen-Li just looks at the fleeing monster in bewilderment, not quite understanding the reason for its escape. At that very moment, a scarlet system window flashes in front of him with a message about the completion of the side mission. For banishing a ferocious beast, the system generously rewards him with 2 new attribute points. However, there is no time for celebration. The deafening noise in the thicket is getting louder and closer. Realizing that something much more dangerous is approaching the fire, the guy decides to immediately change his position. On the go, he unhesitatingly invests the received reward into increasing his strength and dexterity. Determination flashes in his amber eyes, and his body is instantly filled with incredible power. The increased speed allows him to easily overcome any obstacles on the night trail. Leaping out onto a rocky outcrop, Chen-Li suddenly stumbles upon a group of savages cowering in fear. The guy looks down at the natives, who were watching what was happening with trepidation from their hiding place. The savage in the ritual mask looks at him with his mouth open, sincerely not understanding how the stranger was not eaten by the predator. Taking advantage of the moment, Chen-Li proudly raises his weapon and triumphantly declares his superiority, forcing the natives to bow before the new force. Chen-Li frowned in confusion as he looked at the frozen crowd. Did his menacing appearance really not have any effect on them? At this moment, one of the local residents suddenly steps forward, catching Chen-Li off guard. He steps back in confusion, completely unable to understand what this savage has in mind. But instead of a threat, Chen-Li receives an unexpected and strong hug right near his legs, causing him to blush deeply with embarrassment. The natives enthusiastically picked up on their fellow tribeswoman's enthusiasm, unanimously asking Chen-Li to become their great leader. Chen-Li lowered his gaze with restraint, mentally assessing such a peculiar reward for an unexpected quest. With a slight grin, he decides to play along with the locals, generously agreeing to take the reins of power into his own hands. The savages weep from an excess of feelings, raising the newly minted savior to the heavens. Chen-Li's imagination already conjures up majestic pictures of triumph, where he sits on the throne of a true emperor. However, reality brings him back to the harsh, everyday life. Chen-Li proudly straightens his shoulders and proclaims himself the new king of this wild world. A system notification immediately confirms success. The quest is complete, the tribe has recognized his authority, and he is rewarded with valuable experience points. Chen-Li, without hesitation, pours the coveted bonus into the development of his physical form, feeling a surge of hidden strength. The system clearly demonstrates progress. Even the simplest hero can become an invincible warrior if he completes tasks in a timely manner. The opening inventory interface beckons with bottomless rows of cells, where useful prizes are already hidden. But the joy of the generous loot quickly turns to shock when Chen-Li notices a catch in the description of the healing potion. Only 1 day shelf life? That means this precious bottle will have to be put to use immediately, otherwise it'll simply turn into a pumpkin. A clot of healing magic obediently falls into the palm of the hand, pulsating with green light. In a few moments, the potion quickly rushes to the wounds on Chen-Li's back, healing them before the eyes of the astonished audience. The effect exceeds all expectations. Chen Li shows off his strengthened muscles with a satisfied grin, finally convinced of the system's usefulness. And the crowd's enthusiastic cries add fuel to the fire, causing Chen Li to bask in the rays of absolute adoration. Sensing the crowd's devotion, Chen Li decides to personally test the skills of each of his new followers. His gaze carefully assesses the warriors standing before him. The first in line is a giant in a bone mask, whom the guy tells to tell about himself. He proudly displays his impressive muscles, boasting of his remarkable strength in battle. Next come a clever hunter in a wolf skin, and a savage who can scare away animals with just a roar. The impudent strongman confidently declares that he is the strongest warrior in the area, but someone's hand unceremoniously stops him mid-sentence. A pretty female face with a flirtatious smile appears from behind the giant, but the owner of this face turns out to be a mountain of muscles, capable of throwing huge boulders. The next girl looks much more graceful and modestly admits that she can only climb trees to get fruit. Chen Li smiled with relief, happy that at least one normal person had appeared, when suddenly a sudden and powerful slap on the back of the head almost makes him lose his balance. Turning around, he sees a gorgeous blonde in a tiger skin, sincerely asking for forgiveness for an accidental oversight. And then she, with a smile, introduces to the chief her two sons, whom she has not even named yet. Chen Li looked away shyly, trying to pull himself together and not give in to ambiguous thoughts. The sudden rush of thoughts is interrupted by a guy with a strange hairstyle, who declares his incredibly acute hearing and vision. Chen Li immediately realizes that such a person will become an indispensable scout in mapping the surrounding area. Now that everyone has introduced themselves, Chen Li proudly steps into the center. With unwavering confidence, he declares that he will teach them everything and bring true civilization to this wild world. But the savages themselves just looked at each other in bewilderment, sincerely not understanding the meaning of the words spoken to them. Realizing this, Chen Li simplifies his speech to the most understandable and tempting promise: hearty meat every day. These simple words instantly hit the mark, causing a real storm of emotions in the eternally hungry savages. Forgetting their previous doubts, the natives explode with delight, sincerely recognizing him as their new leader. But before the guy has time to enjoy his triumph, an unexpected system window flashes right in front of him. The new task requires not only leading these people, but also building a settlement and increasing the tribe's size to 50 people. He only has 18 days to complete the task, but the impressive reward forces him to take the matter very seriously. Looking around his modest community, Chen Li realizes that there are now barely 15 souls under his command. This means that the only way to complete the quest is to conquer and unite the surrounding tribes. The clock is ticking, and although the task seems almost impossible, the prize is too big to back down. As night falls, the exhausted savages fall to the ground, powerless, and instantly fall asleep. But Chen Li himself couldn't fall asleep because of the treacherous, loud rumbling in his empty stomach. The tough grass and unbearable hunger finally deprive him of the last drops of patience. Realizing the great conquests are not made on an empty stomach, he decides to immediately find some food. Only the carelessness of his fellow tribesmen, who went to bed without a single sentry, causes him slight annoyance. The thought of a juicy piece of meat takes hold of him so strongly that sitting still becomes simply unbearable. Remembering the prey left by the fire after a skirmish with a predator, he decides to take a risk despite the danger in the air. Holding his breath and trying not to make a sound, Chen Li rises from the ground. Carefully stepping over the sleeping savages, he silently slips out of a camp. Having summoned a heavy battle axe from the system inventory, the guy prepares for any unexpected encounter. And with unwavering determination, he rushes into the night thicket, ready to snatch his dinner from the clutches of the wild world. A rustling sound in the silence of the night makes the guy hide in the thicket. Hiding in the bushes, Chen Li carefully peers at the lit fire. To his surprise, there is also some loot that someone has thrown down next to the fire. Now, having taken on the burden of leadership, he realizes that he must take care of more than just himself. Having skillfully tied the carcasses and the horned rabbit with a belt, Chen Li picks up the valuable loot, deciding to bring it back to his fellow tribesmen. Without wasting a second, he rushes back through the darkness of the forest. However, as he runs, the boy notices that the terrain around him has changed and suddenly stumbles. With a loud curse, Chen Li tumbled head over heels into a deep hole. Raising his head, he freezes in shock. 2 moons are shining brightly in the night sky. But he is even more disturbed by the strange shadow that outlines the edges of the hole. Holding his breath, the guy begins to look closely at the shape of his involuntary shelter. And he realizes that he is sitting in the very center of a giant clawed paw print. Huge dents stretch along the entire clearing, crushing the earth and trees. Just recently, a creature of truly monstrous proportions passed through here. The scale of this trace simply boggles Chen Li's mind. Each pit is pressed into the ground with the meticulous and oppressive force of a colossal predator. Going over the options in his mind, the guy tries to convince himself that this is the trace of some kind of exotic bird. But the face of an unprecedented monster, appearing before the eyes, quickly dispels these illusions. Chen Li gripped his weapon tighter and realized he was right in the path of the deadly giant. The main danger has crept too close, and the awareness of the harsh reality flashes in the young man's eyes. Around him, the real nightmares of the ancient world are coming to life, with which it is still too early to engage in open combat. The only sensible step is to flee. You need to find a safe shelter as quickly as possible. As the day draws to a close, sounds are heard in the depths of the forest, announcing the return to camp. However, within the tribe itself, wild passions are raging. Fellow tribesmen are dividing the spoils with scandal, snatching pieces right from their hands. Watching them devour the raw flesh, Chen Li realizes how hopeless their primal state is. Finally, his patience snaps, and a loud cry causes the savages to freeze instantly. The young man realizes that he will have to teach these people the basic rules of order and civilization. Taking on the role of leader, he announces new laws for food distribution in a stern tone. The hunters immediately begin to explain incoherently how their usual routine works. An unprecedented admiration for the wisdom of the new leader flashes in the warrior's eyes. The sudden surge of genuine tenderness from the harsh savages makes Chen Li quite nervous. Trying to defuse the situation, he takes a step back and turns his gaze to the youngest member of the community. The modest little boy only clutches his spear tighter, afraid of displeasing his strict master. In order to finally unite the tribe, Chen Li gets to the main point and begins talking about a new home. Using a simple example, he explains to them the essence of family, like the roots of a great tree, protecting everyone from the creatures of the dark. The muscular warrior listens to every word with trepidation and growing delight. Having understood the idea in her own way, she opens her huge arms wide, eager to show concern. Before Chen Li can even come to his senses, he is overcome by a titanic wave of primal love. Suffocating in the iron grip of his newfound comrade, the young man can only confirm, from now on, they are truly one big family. The muscular warrior is already in full swing celebrating their engagement and making plans for offspring, while a stunned Chen Li tries to cool her ardor. Quickly changing the subject, the young man turns the tribe's attention to a much more pressing matter, finding the ideal location for a new home. Having gathered the savages around him, he takes on the basics of urban development and survival. Drawing diagrams on the ground with a stick, Chen Li explains, first of all, they need a spacious plain. The proximity of the river will not only solve the problem of drinking water, but will also ensure fertility along with natural protection. Dreaming out loud about reaching the sea and building ships, he is met only with genuine bewilderment from his fellow tribesmen. At this moment, little Xiaosheng approaches the leader, ready to share an important clue. Noticing the illumination on the boy's face, Chen Li immediately promises to make him the chief minister if he shows him the right path. However, the young scout immediately warns, the chosen lands have long been occupied by a ferocious herd of giant bulls. But in Chen Li's eyes, dangerous monsters instantly turn into an endless source of meat, milk, and labor. Anticipating a rich booty, the young man rubs his fists resolutely. With one swing of his axe, he ignites the fighting spirit of the tribe, drawing the savages along with him. Soon the squad plunges into the dense thicket, carefully making their way to the territory of the horned giants. The chicken, sent forward, looks around awkwardly, assessing the situation ahead. Hiding in the bushes with their feathered scout, the hunters wait patiently for the right moment. Chen Li smiles and encourages the tense Xiaosheng, advising him not to cause unnecessary fear. Having reached the edge of the forest, the group prepares for the final throw. A small guide points to a rocky ledge that offers an excellent view. Maintaining a touch of irony, Chen Li takes his first steps up the steep climb. But as soon as they look over the top of the ridge, a sight opens up before them that no one was prepared for. Before them lay a picturesque valley with a winding river and suspiciously regular outlines of stone walls on the horizon. Chen Li sniffs the air, detecting a strange, alien odor, and a spark of excitement lights up in his eyes. The system instantly responds to the call, filling the space around it with shimmering neon interfaces. A digital map of the area unfolds before Chen Li's mind's eye, turning the wilderness into a tactical plan. It was as if an invisible switch clicked in his head, causing the guy to suddenly pull back and grab his companion by the hand. The companions hiss at Chen Li in panic, begging him to be quieter, otherwise the mysterious black bulls will hear them. Chen Li frowned doubtfully but decided to be cautious, listening to the advice of the locals. The system scans the surrounding flora and fauna, producing a dossier on every bush and tree with ruthless precision. Even the massive trunks of centuries-old trees hide potential resources and threats in their branches. The mutated inhabitants of these places look both absurd and deadly, forcing one to be on guard. Giant insects with eerie, chitinous shells add a dangerous flavor to the area. Chen Li takes a breath and looks defiantly at his companions, demanding to know where the promised monsters are. The kid points uncertainly somewhere into the distance, beyond the dense crowns of the nearest grove. Chen Li's gaze falls on a green mass of trees, behind which a mysterious target is hidden. The group crouched at the foot of the cliff, peering intently into the thicket in front of them. Silhouettes of figures glide quickly through the grass, trying not to attract unnecessary attention. They hide in dense thickets, afraid to reveal their presence prematurely. Chen Li looks around in disbelief, not understanding why there was such a panic in the quiet forest. Thoughts are feverishly swirling in the guy's head. Could it be that the information was false and there was not a single living soul here? Chen Li turns to his companion in surprise, trying to find out if he has confused the path to the beast's lair. However, the answer to his question is his companion's hesitant gesture, pointing somewhere upward. He shouts out a warning in horror, causing the guy to momentarily become speechless from surprise. And when Chen Li looks up, his heart is gripped by a primal fear. From the deep shadows of the trees rises a gigantic creature covered in ominous glowing runes. The forest shakes from the dull and threatening roar of a giant monster. The little comrade naively asks if they are really going to attack this giant. This crazy idea made Chen Li break out in a cold sweat. With a look of maximum confidence, he orders the group to remain in ambush, promising to personally conduct reconnaissance. Under the admiring glances of his henchmen, the guy proudly disappears behind the nearest tree trunk. And only when he finds himself in shelter does he give vent to the panic that has overwhelmed him and nervous tears. Looking at the giants wandering nearby, Chen Li frantically went over his few skills in his head. Every movement of this monster inspires awe, because in comparison to it, the guy looks like just a tiny target. Cautiously pressing himself against the tree bark, he secretly hopes to meet at least a cub of these creatures. Another deafening roar makes Chen Li grip the handle of his weapon tighter and hold his breath. Watching the monster calmly chew the grass, the boy decides not to provoke the beast during its meal. Seeing the giant looking at the butterfly with unexpected curiosity, a crazy plan was born in Chen Li's head. Hiding the halberd behind his back, the boy carefully creeps up and pats the monster in a friendly manner on its powerful side. He naively tries to defuse the situation by putting on the most fake but friendly smile on his face. But as soon as the beast turns around, its eyes fill with a furious scarlet light and its mouth opens in a wild scream. This deafening cry echoes throughout the thicket, instantly attracting the attention of the rest of the herd. The earth trembles under the heavy hooves of the enraged herd rushing straight towards him. Chen Li instantly realizes the recklessness of his actions and mentally begs for mercy. But the monsters are already catching up with him, forcing him to flee at a mad pace. The sound of water and the tramp merge into a single deafening roar as he dives into the saving lake at full speed. Emerging, he sees the angry silhouettes of the animals continuing their pursuit at the very edge of the water. His fellow tribesmen, watching from hiding, watch with awe and horror as the madman challenges an entire dangerous herd. Giant carcasses fly out of the thicket, raising clouds of dust and water. Cornered, Chen Li races along a sheer cliff face with enraged monsters breathing down his neck. A mighty leap carries him onto a vertical wall, leaving behind formidable pursuers. Every movement requires utmost concentration because the slightest mistake will cost him his life. Clinging with all his might, he soars up the smooth rock as the beasts attack blindly. Unable to cope with inertia, the massive monsters crash into each other and fall to the ground with a crash. Settling down on a ledge, Chen Li watches in amazement at the clumsiness of the rampaging giants. But it's too early to relax. The enraged animals once again turn their furious gazes on him. Assessing the strength of the shelter, Chen Li understands that this wall will not withstand their onslaught for long. Having lost sight of their target, the giants begin to look around in confusion. Once at a relative height, Chen Li takes a breath and assesses the situation. A daring plan is already maturing in his head: to return, unite all the hunters and arm them to the teeth. But for now, this grand idea is faced with a harsh reality. How can we get down safely now? To be all the ways. Below, those same ferocious creatures patiently wait, blocking the only direct path. Instead of running into trouble, Chen Li decides to go around the dangerous area by taking the top. The surrounding landscape opens up from an unexpected height, allowing one to appreciate the scale of the wild lands here. But instead of despondency, a bold, self-confident smile plays on Chen Li's face. This look reveals the passion of a man who is used to challenging fate itself. At this point, his ambitions go far beyond simple survival. It seems that he is already trying on the role of the true ruler of these places. However, in the dense thickets, no less colorful inhabitants are watching him. Through an improvised sight, local residents watch the situation below with bated breath. Some people were already afraid for the fate of the reckless newcomer, but the local thug decides not to waste time and climbs the tree. A powerful push, and he takes off at incredible speed. A sudden whistle cuts through the air just above his head. A sharp cut rips through the tree trunk right next to the shelter. The frightened comrade immediately rushes to give the savior the praise he deserves. But Chen Li only maintains the imperturbable appearance of a winner. Soon, the hero's triumphant return attracts the attention of local residents. The delighted spectators are ready to fall on their knees before the new leader. However, Chen Li cuts short the unnecessary pathos with a slight gesture. The leader triumphantly shows the defeated beast to the inhabitants, inviting them to appreciate the trophy. Wild cries of delight and jubilation immediately spread throughout the tribe, filling the surrounding jungle. Taking up the forged axe, Chen Li decides to move from simple demonstrations to visual teaching. He raises his weapon above his head, explaining to the savages that true strength lies not only in muscles, but also in craftsmanship. The young man's friendly attitude and absolute confidence immediately endear him to everyone present. The hunters greet his words with thunderous approval, ready to absorb every word of their new leader. The deep forest falls silent for a moment before ancient craftsmanship is revealed to the world. With one swift and precise strike, Chen Li cuts off the trunk of a mighty tree, causing it to collapse to the ground. He freezes, holding the tool with ease as the splinters from the fallen giant scatter around him. The savages look at the cut-down tree trunk with complete confusion and undisguised amazement. One of them sincerely does not understand why they would cut down a tree that doesn't even bear edible fruit, to which Chen Li calmly urges them to watch closely as something greater is created. Using a deft blade, he peels away the bark and, step by step, sharpens the edge of a simple wooden branch. The system immediately records the birth of a primitive spear, significantly increasing the characteristics of its creator. Having taken a stable stance, the young man raises the improvised projectile for a powerful throw. With a predatory squint, he puts all his strength into one impulse and sends the spear flying. The weapon crashes into the thick bark of a nearby tree, and Chen Li is only condescendingly pleased with the result. The amazed native looks at the depth of penetration in amazement, not believing his own eyes. Realizing the lethality of such a simple thing, his fellow tribesmen literally knock Chen Li off his feet with genuine delight. The young man hands over his firstborn to Shiku, causing him to feel an incredible surge of pride and devotion. After giving orders to prepare even more weapons for the upcoming training, Chen Li sends the enthusiastic warriors off to work. The new weapon immediately finds use in demonstration fights between fellow tribesmen. However, primitive warriors still evaluate spears only by their length and strength. To demonstrate the true potential of this weapon, Chen Li does not hesitate to challenge two of the strongest fighters to a fight at once. The giants exchange glances and do not hide their confidence, eagerly accepting the young man's challenge. With a furious cry, they simultaneously rush towards their leader, hoping to crush him with their onslaught. But Chen Li remains unmoved and easily dodges the first devastating attack. With a precise movement, he slips between the attackers, forcing them to strike into the void. Every action of the leader is imbued with composure, and the lightning-fast counterattack immediately knocks one of the opponents off their feet. Without giving the second one a chance to come to his senses, the young man instantly seizes the initiative and sends him into the dust as well. Everything happens so quickly that the attackers don't even have time to realize their defeat. The children watching the fight freeze with their mouths open at the skill they witness. Seasoned warriors are also in complete shock from the incredible agility of their leader. Chen Li merely tentatively acknowledged his victory, stopping the shaft a millimeter from his defeated opponent's body. Breathing heavily, the fighter realizes with horror if this shaft had a combat tip, he would already be dead. The tribesmen can only acknowledge the complete superiority of the young man and his absolute authority. Taking advantage of the moment, Chen Li clearly explains how the spear's length and point give it a huge advantage over the enemy. But theory alone is not enough, and the leader moves on to the next stage of training, throwing. Having placed a heavy stone in the distance as a target, he promises a valuable reward to the one who hits the target first. Inspired by the challenge, one of the fighters runs forward and raises his weapon for a swing. Putting all his strength into it, he sends the spear flying towards the target. The tip whistles as it hits the edge of the stone, sending up a shower of sparks and fragments. The thrower scratches the back of his head in confusion, smiling guiltily in front of the young man's stern gaze. Zhenli only sighs and calls the next hunter to arms. The next attempt turns out to be no better, forcing the newcomer to make embarrassed excuses. On the stone target, there are only a couple of chips and a spear sticking out past the target. The tribesmen look at each other with alarm, realizing how poor their aim is. But the next throw cuts through the air in a completely different way, with a precise and crushing blow straight to the center. The crowd around explodes with astonished cries at such a perfect hit. The culprit of the general delight turns out to be a young hunter in the fluffy skin of a white wolf. Zhenli sincerely praises the guy, encouraging him and presenting him with a well-deserved award. However, the joy is interrupted by the alarming cry of a sentry coming from the very tops of the trees. He warns that a giant beast is approaching them from the thicket at terrifying speed. The hunters instantly gather into a group, clutching their weapons and peering into the frozen forest. The ground beneath their feet begins to shake from the approaching heavy footsteps. The outline of a creepy monster with glowing red eyes appears through the dense greenery. The next moment, a huge horned monster bursts out of the thicket with a deafening roar. A ferocious forest giant rushes at full speed straight towards the stunned people. Without wasting a second, Zhenli decisively raised his spear and took control of the squad into his own hands. At this time, a mysterious leopard girl watches the unfolding battle with interest. Zhenli skillfully dodges the first ram and gives the command to surround the enraged creature. Zhenli's strike hits the target, stopping the monster's monstrous onslaught. But there is no time to relax. This is the perfect moment for a counterattack. Zhenli immediately gives orders to his comrades, urging them not to lose the initiative. The rest of the fighters react immediately, rushing at the beast with their spears at the ready. The sharp spikes pierce the beast's skin, causing it to roar in pain. Zhenli makes a sharp movement, but his weapon cannot withstand the monstrous force of the blow. The spear shatters into pieces, but Zhenli maintains a frighteningly calm expression. The beast retreats for a moment, breathing heavily and preparing for another lunge. The giant boar turns sharply, turning a mad gaze towards the new offenders. The monster rushes towards its dodging comrade with a furious roar. The allies barely manage to dodge the crushing ram of the enraged beast. Zhenli's face once again displays the predatory, confident grin of a true strategist. Like a battering ram, the monster crashes into the forest thicket again, destroying everything around. Zhenli shouts out a new command, directing the rest of the squad. A hail of javelins falls again on the back of the exhausted beast. Another powerful blow shakes the air, forcing the monster to rush further. At that moment, Zhenli appears nearby, materializing a completely new deadly weapon in his hand. With one swift movement, he delivers a deep, slashing blow to the beast's hide. An unknown observer freezes in amazement at what is happening in the battle arena. The fighters continue to methodically put pressure on the enemy, driving the beast into a deadly trap. One of the warriors fearlessly throws himself straight onto the back of the enraged monster. The monster's deafening roar shakes everything around, but the squad does not retreat an inch. Clinging with all his might, the little hunter thrusts his wooden pole straight into the giant's eye. The furious beast rears up, but Zhenli is already rushing towards it, ready to deliver the decisive blow. Soaring high into the sky above the monster's horned head, he raises his heavy weapon. A blinding flash of combat energy cuts through the air in a single crushing swing. A powerful wave from the impact crashes down, raising huge clouds of dust and smoke. For a moment, everything becomes silent, and the stunned tribesmen peer fearfully into the thick curtain. As the fog begins to clear, the majestic silhouette of the victor appears before them. Zhenli stands confidently on the fallen giant, demonstrating his absolute superiority to everyone. With an open and proud smile, he sincerely praises his loyal comrades for their bravery. Realizing that the terrible beast has been finally defeated, the warriors burst into jubilant cries and glorify their king. Amidst the general triumph, only little Shang remains lying on the carcass of the beast, exhausted from the fear he had experienced. Noticing this, Zhenli is illuminated by the rays of the sun and extends a helping hand to the young fighter. The little boy timidly squeezes his leader's hand, while a feeling of genuine delight fills his heart. Wiping away tears, he expresses his deepest respect and gratitude to the man who became a true hero to him. Zhenli looks at him with warmth, seeing in the boy the potential of a future great warrior. The rest of the relatives, in a noisy crowd, pick up the joyful mood of their ruler. With a confident smile, Zhenli promises the boy a new weapon and a place by his side on future campaigns. And this jubilant cry is taken up by the entire detachment, marking another glorious victory. The ancient forest rustles around, sheltering the tribe in its green embrace after a hard hunt. The hunters sit around the huge prey, boasting to each other about their exploits. Large pieces of juicy meat are distributed among fellow tribesmen, showing respect to the strongest. But the strong warrior is in no hurry to share with ordinary warriors, saving the best piece. Embarrassed, she brings the raw trophy to Chen Li, hoping to please her leader. Noticing the confusion in his gaze, the girl is sincerely perplexed. Chen Li recalls how easily they reverted to their wild habits and began eating raw meat again. She admits that they simply don't know how to make fire without his help. After all, fire is not just warmth, but the first and most important step on the path to civilization. Without the ability to produce flame, their tribe will remain at the level of primitive savages. So, Chen Li decides to teach them the ultimate survival skill once and for all. He takes dry wood and prepares everything necessary for a visual lesson. Gathering his fellow tribesmen around him, the young man announces that today their lives will change forever. With quick and confident movements, he begins to rotate the wooden stick. The friction quickly heats the wood, and a thin stream of smoke rises above the dead wood. And then, a moment later, the treasured spark bursts out of the dust. Chen Li carefully fans the flame in front of the shocked hunters. The warriors freeze in silent shock, unable to believe the miracle they have seen. Chen Li merely smirked and gave the joker a light slap on the back of the head, calling him to order. Now the savages understand that fire obeys reason, opening a new era for their tribe. Before the flames could die down, a bright system notification flashed in front of Chen Li. Successful fire production brings a generous reward in the form of technology points. The system reports that they can be used to decipher mysterious rock paintings. This is the key to understanding the ancient signs and messages left by the previous owners of these lands. He is distracted from his thoughts about the system by a fellow tribesman who comes running with unexpected news. Chen Li listens attentively to the report about the recently defeated beast. It turns out that somewhere in the dense thickets there are small, helpless baby boars hiding. At that very moment, the leader was faced with a new task: domesticating wild animals. Conquering this world requires not only brute force, but also farming skills. Appreciating the generous rewards for completing the quest, Chen Li accepts the challenge without hesitation. The kindred prepare to fulfill the next will of their leader with a joyful cry. He only strictly warns them to act carefully and not to harm the children. Like a hurricane, the hunters take off, leaving behind only clouds of dust. While they are hunting, it is necessary to prepare a reliable enclosure for the future cattle. Chen Li addresses the rest of his kin, urging them to quickly prepare for work. Obeying his word, the men go into the forest and soon bring back heavy armfuls of branches. Having piled the prepared wood around the fire, they await further instructions. The rough warriors still look at the collected building materials with amazement, but Chen Li, step by step, begins to teach them the intricacies of creative work. In the skilled hands of savages, strong dry fibers are woven into strong ropes, laying the foundation for a future enclosure. Each savage exerts himself to the limit of his strength, barely holding back his heavy breathing. Chen Li confidently leads the process, ordering that all the extracted materials be brought to one place. Having carefully assessed the prepared area with markings on the ground, he calls the tribe to come closer. Before their very eyes, he personally demonstrates how to tightly and securely tie wooden beams with strong ropes. Patiently connecting element after element, the guy clearly demonstrates the simple but flawless principle of assembly. And soon, right in the middle of the parking lot, a neat and sturdy shelter appears, covered with a thick layer of straw. The savages are overjoyed, shouting enthusiastically and praising their brilliant leader. But before the young man can explain anything, the excited crowd rushes inside with whoops. The tribesmen literally cram into the cramped building, pushing each other away and arguing for the right to live in such a luxurious place. Chen Li just heavily covers his face with his hand, realizing the comical and absurd nature of this situation. Distracted from the hustle and bustle, he notices his fellow tribesmen returning from hunting. In their hands, they carefully carry the squealing little piglets they have caught. Having sincerely praised the hunters for the excellent catch, the young man accepts the result with a smile. And then he points his finger at the newly erected structure and orders that the babies be placed inside. At that very moment, one of the savages, in despair, rushes towards Chen Li and literally grabs hold of him. With undisguised resentment in his voice, the warrior is indignant at how one can give away such a magnificent lair to some pigs. The second one immediately hangs on the leader's neck, tearfully lamenting that they also want to live in such a house. Disgusted, Chen Li throws off his fellow tribesmen and calmly says, Those who want to live in a pigsty will not receive normal wooden houses. Instantly realizing their mistake, the savages immediately begin to disown the building and push each other out. Satisfied with the effect produced, the chief calmly watches as the piglets are finally sent to their rightful home. Observing this, Chen Li decides to ask the natives in more detail about the local customs and their previous way of life. It turns out that in the past, savages didn't even think about raising livestock, relying solely on blind luck during the hunt. But now that the piglets finally have a secure pen, the savages are beginning to realize all the advantages of a settled life. Chen Li gives his students an encouraging smile and advises them to take their time and absorb new knowledge gradually. At that moment, a mysterious glowing chest suddenly appears before his eyes, signaling another system notification. When the interface opens, it reveals to the young man a list of exquisite culinary recipes that he has yet to master. This makes Chen Li grin conspiratorially, as being a great chef in this primitive world promises incredible benefits. Moreover, for successfully preparing these dishes, the system promises to unlock special, extremely useful rewards. Night falls, and under the light of two mysterious moons, the tribe falls into a deep sleep while Chen Li keeps watch by the fire. The child sitting nearby listens, fascinated, to the stranger's stories about distant lands and the amazing wonders of progress. The quiet crackle of the flame breaks the silence of the night jungle, bringing two such dissimilar interlocutors closer together. The boy's sincere friendliness resonates with the heart of the little savage, who is ready to tell him all the secrets of these places. Touched by such spontaneity, Chen Li cheerfully pats the boy on the head, sincerely thanking him for his help. However, his gaze instantly becomes serious when it comes to other inhabitants of this endless forest. The kid cautiously admits that other tribes do live nearby, but their customs are incredibly cruel. Intrigued by the new threat, the boy asks to be given all the information about the number and location of potential enemies. Thus, Chen Li learns of three formidable forces: the nearby Coconut Grove tribe, led by a beautiful but dangerous warrior. A little further, in the dark depths of the sea bay, live bloodthirsty amphibians that know no mercy even for their own kind. But the most dangerous of all is the giant rock tribe, which settled in the southwest under the leadership of an invincible leader. Possessing truly superhuman strength, this monster is capable of tearing apart a ferocious predator with its bare hands, turning any encounter with it into a death sentence. As Chen Li pondered the coming dangers by the dying fire, he realized that brute force was not the only path to survival. He sincerely hoped to find a peaceful way to resolve the brewing conflict and come to an agreement with his neighbors. However, suddenly a chilling shiver ran down his spine, foreshadowing something inevitable. From the darkness emerged the figure of his powerful comrade, who decided to interrupt his deep thoughts with her strong embrace. With a playful smile, she suggested that he while away the long night with some extremely intriguing activity. Chen Li's intense attention instantly caused him to break out in a cold sweat, and his eyes filled with genuine horror. In his imagination, she sometimes appeared as a fragile and tender maiden in the midst of a blooming garden, but the harsh reality in the form of a mountain of steel muscles and a flirtatious imitation of feline habits quickly brought him back to earth. Realizing that he needed to save himself immediately, the boy frantically grabbed hold of a fellow tribesman running past as his only chance to escape. Having come up with the most ridiculous excuse, Chen Li literally flew away into the darkness of the night, saving his life from suffocating love. And while the warrior, deeply offended, was barely holding back tears of disappointment, the fugitives were already setting up a new observation post. Having spent the rest of the night on the branches of a giant tree, by morning they noticed a suspicious movement at the very edge of the water. From a bird's-eye view, there was an excellent view of the sandy shore where the strange chase was unfolding. The strange bird, driven mad by fear, tried to escape the pursuit of mysterious blue-skinned creatures. The ferocious hunters moved with incredible speed, driven by primal instinct and the thirst for easy prey. In an instant, the unfortunate victim found himself in the clutches of one of the attackers, filling the coast with a cry of victory. Chen Li immediately recognized them as representatives of the Sea Bay tribe, whose treachery was legendary on the island. But instead of uniting, the savages immediately started a furious quarrel over the caught prey. Watching their ridiculous brawl, the young man quickly appreciated the excellent physical capabilities of his enemies and their obvious stupidity. This absurd feud gave Chen Li the perfect chance to launch a sudden and devastating blow. While his fellow tribesmen were already falling into panic, soberly assessing their modest chances. The blue-skinned creatures themselves looked extremely dangerous, surpassing humans in physical strength and ferocity, but Chen Li understood perfectly well that in a real confrontation, brute force was far from the decisive factor. After some quick calculations, the young man estimated the overall combat strength of his modest squad at only 15 points, while the enemy's total potential confidently reached 30, creating a twofold advantage. But instead of retreating in the face of superior forces, he only became more determined to set a trap for them. After looking at the endless green hills, Chen Li hurried back to his people to begin preparations. Meanwhile, an uneasy calm reigned in the camp itself, and the survivors dejectedly went about their daily work. The appearance of the leader made the tribe's strongest warrior freeze in surprise and awe. Joyful cries instantly spread throughout the forest thicket, announcing the triumphant return of their leader. His devoted comrades could hardly hold back tears of relief, because in his absence they felt completely helpless. With a warm and confident smile, Chen Li reassured his loyal subjects, immediately moving on to discussing the plan of action. His authority among the savages was unquestionable, and the giants prepared to carry out any of his orders without hesitation. Even the smallest inhabitants of the camp were eager to prove themselves, swearing allegiance to the new leader. Realizing that precious time was running out, the young man immediately distributed the tasks and sent the men out to get materials. At that moment, a stately warrior approached him, deciding to share a very specific but practical advice about local plants. Her childish spontaneity, combined with her impressive muscles, created a rather amusing contrast. Slightly taken aback by this unexpected conversation, Chen Li only smiled amiably in response to her concern. Inspired by the leader's attention, the girl immediately rushed to call the other women for help. And the work began to boil. While the chieftain personally sharpened the battle stakes, his tribe began to drag away heavy stones for future defense. Chen Li personally selected a suitable whetstone to demonstrate the basics of the craft to his fellow tribesmen. He explained to them step by step the simple technology to cut a block to a sharp point, give it a shape, and securely fasten it with a rope with a strong handle. Thus, the first truly formidable weapon of the new era was born, the stone axe. The women froze in silent delight, ready to pray to their brilliant leader, whose knowledge seemed to them a divine gift. But Chen Li himself was in no hurry to rejoice, because the intrusive system panel appeared before his eyes again. Mentally sighing from the endless worries, the guy threw away unnecessary thoughts. He needed to continue working. He gave his fellow tribeswomen clear instructions and ordered them to bring the finished samples to him for personal inspection. Soon, one of the girls approached him, shyly holding out a perfectly crafted replica of his weapon. At that moment, a bright turquoise notification flashed in front of Chen Li, causing him to freeze in surprise. The system confirmed the tribe's successful transition to a new stage of development and activated a unique hidden talent recognition skill. Looking at his faithful assistant, the chieftain saw a floating inscription above her head, revealing her innate gift for creating tools. His gaze instantly changed, filling with a deep analytical interest in the prospects that had opened up. The warrior herself became noticeably nervous, not understanding why the master was looking so intently into her face. Realizing the value of such an ally, Chen Li enthusiastically urged the tribe to make as many weapons as possible before nightfall. Time was inexorably approaching evening, and the crimson sun was slowly hiding behind the peaks of the distant mountains. But even at sunset, the work did not stop. The proud craftswoman triumphantly raised her 30th spear over her head. Tired but immensely pleased, Chen Li sincerely admired her incredible tenacity and skill. However, looking at her wounded palms covered with bloody calluses, he tenderly squeezed them in his hands and quietly thanked her for her devotion. From such unexpected warmth and care, the stern warrior's heart melted, and a deep blush appeared on her cheeks. Noticing this, the other girls immediately lined up, rushing to show the chief their scratched hands in the hope of getting at least a drop of his precious attention. Chen Li, completely unaccustomed to such a stormy display of female attention, blushed deeply with embarrassment. Hastily declaring that enough weapons had been created for today, he shamefully fled under the pretext of checking the men's training. Making his way through the dense thickets, the boy tried to calm his wildly pounding heart and get into a serious mood. Suddenly, his sensitive hearing picked up a strange whistling sound coming from the training ground. Coming out into the clearing, he froze, seeing an incredible sight right in front of him. The next second, a giant log flew past his head with a terrible whistle. It was an improvised moving target, swinging on strong vines. And right before the leader's eyes, the heavy projectile split in half with a dull crack from a well-aimed spear strike. Noticing the leader's approach, the faithful comrade in wolfskin immediately rushed to report the results. It turned out that during his absence, the fighters had made a colossal breakthrough in accuracy and teamwork. Each warrior revealed their unique talents, diligently honing their skills and throwing at moving targets. Particularly striking was the well-coordinated tandem of the two formidable brothers, whose devastating throws acted like a single mechanism. The boy's success genuinely pleased Chen Li, as there were only a few hours left before the decisive clash. Ahead of them lay a brutal battle with the merciless Black Bulls, whose primal power brought terror to the entire area. And to ensure victory, the leader hinted at preparing a special trump card, causing his comrade to hold his breath in anticipation. The secret trump card was supposed to be a charming but incredibly strong warrior from a friendly tribe. The night darkness gradually descended upon the camp, plunging the wild jungle into an uneasy silence. Even the night birds took off from the branches in fear, disturbing the peace of the sleeping forest. And down below, by the hot fire, Chen Li continued to work tirelessly while everyone else slept. With each blow of the heavy hammer, he forged not just a weapon but confidence in the future victory of his tribe. Every movement he made was precise, and the blows of his heavy weapon confidently struck sparks from the stubborn stone. The awakened tribesmen watched in amazement as something completely new was born right before their eyes. Chen Li immediately gathered warriors around him, ready to listen to his cunning and ambitious plan. He showed them special leaves whose poisonous juice was supposed to become their secret weapon against the ferocious monsters. At this point, the warriors brought the first preparations, awaiting further instructions from their leader. The work began to boil with renewed vigor, because now they had everything they needed to create deadly equipment. The creation of the simplest stone mortar opened up new technological possibilities for them, bringing the desired victory closer. The hunters, filled with excitement, were eager to immediately rush into battle under the leadership of their leader. But Chen Li knew that before a great battle, his men needed a hearty dinner and a good night's sleep first. And so, when the first rays of the morning sun illuminated the peaks of distant mountains, the decisive day had arrived. Chen Li himself met this dawn high in the branches of a tree, restoring his strength before the coming test. The silence of the early morning gave him rare moments of peace, allowing him to fully collect his thoughts. But soon, the camp below came to life, and the warriors hastened to report that all preparations were finally completed. To prove her readiness, one of the warriors threw the newly created spear with all her might. The deadly projectile whistled through the air, but Chen Li intercepted it with a flick of his wrist. There was no shadow of doubt in his focused gaze, only a cold determination to see things through to the end. He sternly reminded his fellow tribesmen of those who must remain behind to protect their humble homes and children. Looking down on his army, the leader was convinced that the spirit of his people was stronger than ever before. His answer was a loud cry from his loyal allies, ready to follow him into the very heat of battle. The time has come to raise new weapons and show their enemies the true, crushing power of their united tribe. The tribe rallied around its leader, ready to defend its lands once and for all under his banner. The hunters took up strategic positions at the top of a steep gorge, holding their breath in anticipation of the start. From above, they peered tensely into the dense thickets, knowing that their leader had decided to take a deadly step. Below, unsuspecting, roamed majestic and formidable beasts whose power frightened any stranger. The experienced warrior was the first to notice the approaching target and silently signaled to the others to get ready. The tension grew with every second, because the slightest mistake could ruin their entire carefully thought-out plan. Even the youngest members of the tribe understood the gravity of the moment, clutching their weapons in their hands in excitement. Having handed over their heavy spears to their allies, the warriors froze in full combat readiness, awaiting the decisive signal. Now the fate of this entire hunt depended only on whether their leader would cope with his insane role as bait. Meanwhile, in the very heart of the forest, giant thunderbolts grazed peacefully, unaware of the imminent threat. Chen Li moved silently through the thicket, stalking his prey like the most patient predator. His gaze was fixed on the leader of the herd, whose incredible strength could trample anyone in its path. The leader's mind told him that to guarantee success, he needed to lure out only one, the most vulnerable individual. Sliding between the branches, he looked for the ideal position to deliver the first provocative blow. The stakes were higher than ever. He simply had no room for error, because his own life was at stake. With a powerful slam, Chen Li broke the silence of the forest and announced the beginning of the great game. Coming out from hiding, he began to openly mock the mighty beast, inflaming its rage. The monster's eyes filled with crimson anger, and a deafening roar echoed throughout the area. As if challenging death itself, the young man spread his arms wide to meet the avalanche of enraged flesh rushing towards him. And at that very moment, Chen Li started running as fast as he could, dragging the enraged herd right into the prepared trap. The monsters were hot on his heels, and every step Chen Li took was an inhuman effort, because death itself was roaring behind him. But ahead, the stone walls of the shelter loomed, where loyal allies, led by Shigu, were waiting for his signal. The monstrous leader of the herd raised his huge paw for a fatal blow, ready to tear apart the impudent fugitive. At the top of the wall, warriors prepared heavy spears, ready to rain steel down on the enemy at the first call. The leader's heart sank in his chest when he saw how close the enraged beast had gotten. With a menacing battle cry, the defenders hurled their weapons downwards, cutting through the cold air. The sharp tips pierced the monster's rough skin with force, causing it to wince in unexpected pain. As the wounded bull roared in agony, Chen-Li made a desperate leap, clinging to the sheer cliff with his fingers. At the edge of the ledge, a small warrior in a wolf hood took aim with a calm expression, waiting for the perfect moment. With a precise throw, her spear pierced the mouth of the roaring creature, forever silencing its furious roar. Having lost its balance, the leader's huge body crashed to the ground with a roar, dragging the others down with it. The young man, hanging at a great height, breathed heavily, feeling the strength rapidly leaving his body. And below, at the very foot of the wall, the monsters, maddened with rage, continued to maim each other in a deadly trap. But suddenly, the dry stone under Chen-Li's fingers cracked deeply and began to crumble with a cracking sound. At the very last moment, when the abyss was about to swallow the young man, Shigu's strong hand grabbed his wrist with a death grip. Chen-Li's gaze flashed with the same fierce flame he had survived, and now it was time to end this battle. The defenders continued to mercilessly bombard the disoriented herd with shells, not giving the enemy a single chance of escape. Safely atop the wall, the exhausted but alive king was finally able to catch his breath under the worried gazes of his comrades. At this fateful moment, Shigu showed true greatness, revealing within himself a rare talent for leading troops. Giving confident orders, he stood guard over their new home, ready to defend his king to the very end. As tensions mounted on the battlefield, Chen-Li's allies were the first to sense something was wrong, noticing a frightening change in their enemy's behavior. The enraged monsters, who just a second ago were ready to tear them apart, suddenly began to weaken and fall to the ground. A triumphant grin flashed across Chen-Li's face. The effect of his cunning plan had exceeded all expectations. From the heights of a stone cliff, a lookout, breathless with excitement, hurried to report a new threat. An enraged avalanche of wild bulls rushed through the forest thicket, raising clouds of spray and shaking the earth towards the river. But Chen-Li remained icy calm, urging his warriors to hold their formation and not give in to panic. After all, behind this triumph was a secret alliance with the dangerous mistress of the sea depths, whose deadly poison they used. Weakened by the toxin, the animals could barely stand on their feet, becoming easy targets for the breathless hunters. At the leader's command, the loyal comrades raised their weapons, ready to unleash all their fury on the enemy caught off guard. The first poisoned spears whistled down, piercing the flesh of the doomed monsters and causing them to roar in pain. However, when victory seemed very close, Chen-Li gestured for everyone to freeze. Pity and doubts should not have prevented them from completing the task, because the survival of the entire tribe was at stake. Clouds of dust were already rising on the horizon from the approach of the rest, even more ferocious part of the herd. The young leader understood that every second of delay could cost them their lives. Rallying around their leader, the warriors awaited his final word, ready to fight to their last breath. Having assessed the scale of the impending threat from the lookout's words, Chen-Li began to quickly recount his remaining forces. A fire of determination blazed in his eyes as their supply of deadly weapons ran low. The comrades understood the full risk, but retreating now would mean wasting all their efforts and admitting defeat. Chen-Li was well aware of the madness of this undertaking, throwing a handful of survivors against an entire army of enraged creatures. Especially now, when from the depths of the forest the shadow of true primeval horror was approaching them. To defeat this horde, it was necessary to deliver one precise, crushing blow straight to the heart to their leader. The plan was hatched instantly: lure the monster out, forcing its own rage to work against it. Using the monster's cubs as live bait seemed cruel, but it was the only way to survive. Chen-Li understood the riskiness of the undertaking, but there was no turning back now. All preparations had been completed. Crouched on the clifftop, the hunters held their breath, waiting for their main target to approach. And so, pushing aside the centuries-old trees, a colossal offspring stepped into the clearing, whose very presence deprived one of the will to fight. A deafening, primal roar shook the air, causing the earth to shake and the warriors to press themselves against the stones. A destructive sound wave struck the rocks, sending a deep web of cracks across the stone slopes. Observers at the summit realized with horror that their safe shelter was rapidly turning into a death trap. The situation finally got out of control when, below, at the very foot, a mad herd grouped together in seconds. With a wild roar, the furious creatures began to ram the stone base of the cliff at full speed. From above, this frantic onslaught seemed pure suicide, devoid of any common sense. However, Chen Li immediately figured out their terrible plan. The monsters were not just raging, they were methodically destroying the support. A deafening crack from below confirmed his worst fears. The mountain beneath their feet began to split apart. The next second, the top of the cliff began to fall with a roar, dragging tons of earth and rock debris with it. In the ensuing chaos, one of the warriors lost her balance and fell straight into the gaping abyss. The rapid fall in a cloud of dust left her with no chance of surviving the impact with the ground. Without a second thought, Chen Li rushed after her into this deadly abyss. Sliding down the sheer, crumbling wall, he desperately tried to close the distance and intercept the falling girl. At the very last moment, he managed to catch her at the very ground, surrounded by his loyal comrades, ready to accept the inevitable battle at the bottom of the gorge. Carefully lowering his wounded companion to the ground, Chen Li quietly told her to rest, realizing that the most severe test lay ahead of them. There was no way out of this deep gorge, and ferocious monsters had already surrounded them on all sides, blocking any path of retreat. The hunters looked at each other in heavy silence, realizing that running was pointless and that all they could do was accept this unequal fight. Gigantic beasts with blazing red eyes and ominous scarlet patterns on their skins were advancing straight towards them. It became obvious that this was not a chance meeting, but a planned trap into which these creatures had lured them. Chen Li realized with alarm that these monsters possessed a frighteningly high level of intelligence, surpassing that of ordinary wild predators. At that moment, masked allies appeared on the top of the cliff, ready to come to the rescue at any moment and strike from above. But the guy abruptly stopped them with a shout, ordering them to wait and not to interfere ahead of time, so as not to ruin their only chance. Left face to face with a superior enemy, the warriors froze in anticipation of the first crushing blow. And the animals, as if sensing this challenge, simultaneously rushed forward, shaking the earth with their furious run. The hunter, spear at the ready, rushed towards the danger, ready to be the first to deliver a crushing blow. With lightning speed, he launched his weapon straight into the attacking monster's mouth, causing it to roar in pain. Chen Li himself then rushed into battle, activating his technological weapon, which flashed with a bright neon light. With one precise and powerful swing, he cut through the monster's flesh, leaving behind only a shining trail and splashes of dark blood. Together, they skillfully dodged the massive claws, circling around the disoriented beast. However, the onslaught of the remaining monsters was so strong that even seasoned warriors were momentarily at a loss from this power. But there was nowhere to retreat, and each of them gave it their all, repelling one ferocious attack after another. At the most desperate moment, one of the tribe's giants grabbed the enraged creature's horns with his bare hands, trying to hold back its onslaught. Straining all his strength, he steadfastly held back the onslaught of the enraged monster, winning precious seconds for his comrades. And it was the perfect moment for those waiting above. At the leader's command, a hail of heavy spears fell directly on the back of the defeated monster. The defeated beast collapsed to the ground, and victory seemed to be in the hunter's hands. The remaining monsters retreated back in panic, unable to withstand such a crushing force. The leader's piercing roar rang out, calling the pack to immediate flight. Yielding to the instinct of self-preservation, the ferocious creatures began to rapidly retreat into the depths of the forest. The hunters watched the fleeing enemy with relief, believing that the nightmare was finally over. However, Chen Li knew very well that such a sudden escape did not bode well. For a moment, a tender image of the one for whose smile he continued this mad struggle flashed through his thoughts. But their thoughts were interrupted by the first heavy drops of rain that washed the tired faces of the soldiers. Suddenly, a furious bolt of lightning split the sky, revealing from the veil of the storm the true ruler of these lands, the Bull King. The darkness around the giant thickened, foreshadowing a quick and inevitable retribution for the death of his relatives. Before the people could come to their senses, the monster erupted from its mouth with a devastating beam of pure energy. A deadly flash instantly blew the rocky cliff into pieces, burying the survivors under the rubble. The earth shook from the indescribable power of the enemy, erasing everything in its path. Realizing that they had no chance in an open battle, Chen Li ordered the survivors to immediately retreat north. He decided to selflessly take the blow himself in order to give his comrades a last chance of salvation. The monster's giant paw came down from above, forcing the young man to dodge at the very last moment. Gripping the handle of the axe until his knuckles turned white, he prepared for a fight where his life was at stake. The beast rushed into a new, furious attack, leaving no time for even a second's respite. Faced with superior strength, Chen Li responded with a series of lightning-fast and desperate strikes. and when the giant horn rushed straight at him, he put up a block, ready to hold back this crushing onslaught to the end. A blow of incredible force shakes everything around, forcing the young man to retreat under this furious onslaught. The monster doesn't give him a second to breathe, slamming its colossal paw down on the ground with a roar. Continuing to fight head-on now would be pure madness, and he has to dodge another deadly swing. Chen Li rushes away, trying to lure the lumbering monster into a narrow rock gorge. But the beast, blinded by rage, has no intention of retreating, crashing into the ancient rocks at full speed. The deafening roar of the collapse causes the local warriors watching this catastrophe to freeze in horror. It seems that hope is lost forever, and even the wounded girl can barely hold back tears of despair. However, from the clouds of dust, an unharmed giant rises again, ready to bring destruction to all living things. His ferocious gaze turns to the defenseless people, and his giant clawed paw reaches out for new prey. The surrounded hunters prepare to accept the inevitable and final battle, clutching their simple spears tighter. Their leader grits his teeth, refusing to show weakness in the face of certain death. But at the most critical moment, a blinding azure flash pierces the air, cutting through the gloom. The crushing attack catches the monster off guard, leaving a deep, bleeding mark on its muzzle. The stunned beast slowly turns its head towards the gorge, from which a chilling thirst for battle emanates. Chen Li steps confidently through the wall of raining debris, his weapon once again glowing with a menacing neon light. There is not a shadow of fear in his burning gaze, only absolute confidence in his imminent victory. Seeing a living hero, the disheartened warriors burst into jubilant cries, not believing their eyes. The enemy leader turns pale with horror, refusing to believe that anyone could survive such a cataclysm. His face contorts into a grimace of rage and fear as he realizes the gravity of his situation. But Chen Li is unstoppable. With a battle cry, he rushes forward to meet his main enemy. A huge, ferocious beast rises amidst the storm, but the tribe's warriors know no fear and are the first to rush into battle. One of them makes a desperate leap, aiming straight for the monster's vulnerable neck. The spear tip pierces the beast's flesh with force, causing it to roar in unexpected pain. The monster writhes furiously, trying to shake off the opponents who caught it off guard, while fast blades cut through the air. Even deep wounds only fuel the rage of this ancient giant, causing him to destroy everything around him. The warrior's onslaught seems like madness, but at that moment, Chen Li enters the battle, rushing swiftly to the aid of his comrades. His crushing blow connects with his target, blinding the monster and forcing it to retreat. In a frenzied agony, the monster opens its mouth, releasing a colossal beam of destructive energy right at the hero's feet. A wave of all-consuming flame passes within centimeters of the terrified allies, nearly turning them to ashes. But Chen Li seizes this moment, soaring high into the stormy sky. He raises his trusty axe for the decisive blow. Overcoming the resistance of the roaring flames, he brings down all his power on the head of the monster. The impact of the collision is so strong that blood spurts from the wounds and the guy's breath catches from the extreme tension. And yet the axe bites deep into the monster's shoulder, cutting through its thick tendons. Realizing that the beast is weakened, the wounded Chen Li orders the rest of the warriors to immediately launch a counterattack. The masked chief takes up this call, ordering his fellow tribesmen to give all their strength for this victory. A hail of deadly projectiles rushes towards the weakened giant, cutting through the curtain of rain. Each hit weakens the monster, whose once menacing roar now sounds pitiful and doomed. Losing its balance, the colossal carcass lists to one side, dragging down streams of mud and stones with it. With a deafening roar, the monster collapses to the ground, raising thick clouds of dust into the sky. The dust slowly settles under the drops of incessant rain, revealing to the soldiers a picture of their incredible triumph. The faces of the exhausted warriors, washed by the cold streams, are frozen in disbelief. The surrounding area is filled with the victorious cries of survivors, confident that the worst is over. But Chen Li, standing over the fallen carcass of the giant to the jubilant cheers of the crowd, is in no hurry to rejoice. Some ominous, oppressive premonition makes his heart clench in anxiety. In the dense forest thicket, hidden by the veil of rain, dozens of other pairs of scarlet, bloodthirsty eyes stood silently frozen. Before the boy can even comprehend the threat, a giant shadow appears behind him with a flash of lightning. A second turns into an eternity as pure, primal terror is reflected in Chen Li's eyes. A crushing blow of unknown force falls to the ground, tearing the air with a crimson flash. The warriors, who just a moment ago were celebrating their triumph, are mercilessly thrown to the sides by the blast wave. The monstrous beast lets out a deafening roar, concentrating destructive energy in its mouth. A deadly beam of searing light sweeps across the battlefield, turning hope to ashes and cries of despair. Cast aside and wounded, Chen-Li gasped for breath, cursing his own unforgivable carelessness. His strength deserts him, and he can hardly find the will to retreat to the shelter of the rocks in the face of a superior enemy. But the enraged monster is not going to let go of its prey, fixing its gaze on him, blazing with rage. The beast raises its paw for a decisive, deadly blow, ready to end the life of the young man. At this fateful moment, the saving silhouette of a devoted ally suddenly flashes before Chen-Li. A heavy blade with a dull, chilling sound pierces the chest of the one who decided to shield it with his body. Time seems to stand still as splashes of someone else's blood splash onto the face of the guy frozen in shock. A storm of powerlessness, rage, and awareness of an irreparable loss rises in his soul. And the faithful comrade slowly falls to his knees under the indifferent drops of rain, falling silent forever on the wet ground. Flashes of their shared past, her smile and laughter mercilessly torment his mind, turning into unbearable torture. And right in front of him, the culprit of this tragedy appears, a primeval monster whose shadow covers the sky itself. Blinded by grief, Chen-Li grips his weapon until his bones crunch, demanding only one thing from the creature, a merciless fight to the death. At that moment, the system erupts with an alarming warning as an ancient, unstoppable force awakens within the young man's body. Engulfed in flames of rage, he rushes forward, ready to crush anyone who dares stand in his way. For a moment, his soul plunges into a cold abyss, where time seems to freeze in anticipation of the outcome. One crushing blow, and the gigantic monster breaks in two with a howl, irrigating the earth with crimson rain. Breathing heavily, Chen-Li turns his mad gaze towards the remaining enemies, challenging them with his wounded body. But the previously ferocious predators now only retreat in fear, not daring to approach the madman. His furious cry drowns out the peals of thunder, causing the very nature around him to tremble. Realizing their helplessness before this embodiment of death, the monsters cowardly fill the surrounding area with howls. They flee in panic, leaving the battlefield to the one who has just proven his absolute superiority. The heavy weapons whistle as they hit the dirt, marking the end of this bloody massacre. The power that was boiling in Chen-Li's veins began to rapidly fade, taking with it the last bits of energy. The wounded body cannot withstand the monstrous load, and the young man's throat is torn apart by a hoarse, painful cough. The surrounding world begins to swim before my eyes, colored in the alarming red tones of fading consciousness. Through the bloody haze, he manages to notice how his fellow tribesmen surround the lifeless body of his fallen friend. But the darkness inexorably draws his mind, plunging him into a deep, saving, dreamless sleep. After an eternity, Chen-Li opens his eyes and sees a gentle, caring face above him, illuminated by a soft light. The cozy warmth of a stranger's hearth and peace finally lull his tormented soul, granting him long-awaited respite. Slowly returning to reality, Chen-Li tries to comprehend where he is and what happened to him. The caring savior explains that after defeating the bulls, their tribe was finally able to move to these safe, fertile lands. The girl's gentle touches calm him, urging him to take his time and restore the strength wasted in battle. But the peace doesn't last long. Chen-Li rises, feeling a strange heat spreading through his body. Concerned about the fate of his comrades, he immediately asks if the rest survived that insane massacre. It turns out that fate spared his faithful comrade, who, despite severe wounds, managed to pull through. Now, he is already standing on his feet, ready to continue defending his new home. And little Dada is also completely safe, sleeping peacefully under a safe shelter, restoring her strength. Chen-Li's heart felt lighter, and he looked with quiet gratitude at the woman who nursed him back to health. Suddenly, a bright flash pierces the space in front of him. A mysterious system interface appears before his eyes. The girl watches in bewilderment as their leader freezes, staring into the void where a mysterious glow hovers. Overcoming the sharp pain in his wounded body, Chen-Li tries to get up, but the wounds make themselves felt. The old fire flashes in his eyes. He understands that it is too early to relax. The system's new task is harsh. A negligible amount of time is given for the development and expansion of the tribe. He gives the first orders, and the faithful assistant unquestioningly agrees to fulfill the will of her king. Leaving the chief alone with his thoughts, she goes outside, where the daily life of the community is in full swing. Chen-Li remains in the semi-darkness of the hut, aware of the full weight of the responsibility placed upon him. A detailed map of new possessions unfolds before him, requiring immediate protection and strengthening of borders. Hiding his fatigue, he orders those who enter to report the situation right from the doorway. And the loyal warriors proudly confirm that their new settlement is ready to grow and prosper under his leadership. Now that he has become a true leader, Chen Li prepares to give his first important orders. One of the loyal scouts is tasked with keeping a close eye on the camp's borders. Realizing the importance of his mission, the scout promises not to miss a single detail. Having willingly accepted the instructions of his ruler, the warrior sets off to fulfill his duty. But Chen Li understands that to ensure the complete safety of this wild land, much more decisive action is needed. The time has come to entrust the most difficult test to the most resilient of his fellow tribesmen. The hunter freezes in amazement when the chief orders him to bring back the trophies of the ferocious beast. But a real shock awaits him at the moment when the formidable royal weapon is placed into his hands. Filled with pride and responsibility, the young warrior rushes off to meet his first dangerous hunt. However, at the entrance to the chieftain's hut, the one for whom a special assignment has been prepared is already timidly waiting. Chen Li, whose authority is growing by the hour, is ready to announce her new role. With a tremor in her heart, the girl crosses the threshold, ready to obey his every word without complaint. And the leader directly states that the internal order of the settlement now depends on her actions. But as soon as the situation took an unexpected turn, the stern Chen Li instantly lost his previous composure. Trying to cope with the awkwardness, he tries to return the conversation to its most serious and business-like tone. The confused guest listens attentively to his plan, realizing how important her diplomatic role is. The discussion turns to alliances with neighboring tribes, with whom it is necessary to establish strong ties. But the girl has doubts, because the strangers outnumber them and are unlikely to agree to a peaceful merger. In response to her doubts, Chen Li displays an unwavering strength, ready to crush anyone who dares to refuse. Now, with a clear strategy, the young leader intends to prove to all his neighbors that his will have to be respected by everyone. However, Chen Li's body, exhausted by past battles, once again makes itself known with a sharp, throbbing pain. The old wounds are too deep, and even weak healing magic can hardly ease his suffering. Seeing his suffering, the faithful companion cannot contain her anxiety for the fate of her leader, but despair quickly gives way to determination when a bold idea is born in her head. She fervently persuades Chen Li to trust her, and promises to personally obtain the rare medicine. Her path lies through an endless ocean of emerald jungles which hold many ancient secrets. Together with a funny but devoted guide, she fearlessly moves towards the unknown. Danger lurks behind every tree, forcing travelers to be extremely careful. With every step, the girl feels how close the cherished goal of this dangerous journey is. The little companion grumbles every now and then, sensing that this walk will definitely not be easy. Soon, through the dense wall of greenery, the sound of a bubbling waterfall reaches them. Hiding in dense thickets, they finally find those for whom they have made this long journey. At the foot of the cliffs, the queen of the coconut grove herself washes her silky green hair. But Chen Li's companion knows very well that the appearance of forest maidens can be extremely deceiving. Legends say that this beautiful ruler is merciless to strangers and knows no mercy for her enemies. As soon as they gaped for just a moment, a hidden patrol caught the scouts off guard. Armed warriors instantly block all escape routes. The captured offenders are unceremoniously brought to trial before their formidable mistress. The queen looks down on the uninvited guests from the height of her majesty, full of icy contempt. Realizing that their lives hang in the balance, the captives desperately try to declare themselves peace ambassadors. The stranger's offer takes the forest warrior by surprise, leaving her frozen in bewilderment. However, the ice ruler is adamant and without a shadow of a doubt orders her warriors to prepare the captives for the worst fate. The realization of imminent death plunges the unfortunate into panic, and cries for help fill the silent thicket. Unwilling to accept this cruel injustice, Ayu desperately tries to appeal to the arrogant queen's reason. She just looks at her indifferently from her stone throne, lazily fingering the spikes of her deadly whip. A barely noticeable superior smile plays on the mistress's lips. Other people's pleas mean nothing to her. Then Ayu decides to play her last trump card, talking about the rich lands in the north of the river. The tension between them reaches its limit when the captive declares that these lands no longer belong to their former owners. The savages in the queen's entourage cannot believe their ears, shocked by the audacious news of strangers encroaching on their lands. The ruler, struck to the quick, slowly rises to her full height, radiating a primal menace. Step by step, she approaches Ayu, offering her to prove her loud words with action. Overcoming the encroaching fear, the captive accepts the challenge, realizing that there is no turning back. At this moment, Chen Li, sensing something amiss, tries to warn his mistress of possible betrayal and a treacherous trap. But Ayu only becomes more inflamed, reminding herself of the crushing power of her magnanimous ruler. Her horrified companions try to smooth things over, hastily assuring the angry forest dwellers of their peaceful intentions. And yet Ayu does not calm down, directly accusing the queen of cowardice and indecision in the face of danger. Deeply offended, the ruler throws off the shackles of propriety, ready to personally tear apart anyone who doubts her power. Her eyes flash with a furious fire, the challenge is accepted, and there is no mercy to be expected for the impudent guests. A moment later, a detachment of forest warriors sets out on a journey led by their involuntary guides. Thus begins their joint journey into the depths of unknown lands, where the fate of both tribes will be decided. The forest dwellers watch in amazement as their new allies cope with the most difficult work without much effort. For children of nature, many familiar things of strangers seem strange and incomprehensible. Their leader tries to maintain a calm demeanor, hiding her growing curiosity in the face of the unknown. Soon they arrive at the very heart of the camp, where the mysterious ruler of these lands sits in the semi-darkness of a majestic tent. Just one glance at his throne makes the elf freeze in deep respect and slight fear. The tension in the air becomes almost palpable as she realizes whose power lurks in that shadow. Before them appears a mighty leader, a true embodiment of the primordial power and indomitable will of his people. His fiery gaze penetrates into the very soul, leaving no doubt that the slightest mistake could cost them their lives. Meanwhile, outside, any sharp sound makes unprepared guests jump in surprise. The other members of the squad are forced to hide, trying not to reveal their presence ahead of time. Chen urges everyone to exercise extreme caution, as in a foreign camp, the slightest mistake could result in disaster. The leader addresses the guests, immediately making it clear that he knows perfectly well where they came from and what their purpose is. His words evoke a storm of emotions, but the forest warriors force themselves to contain their anger and pride for the sake of the common good. But instead of threats, the ruler offers them a generous gift, which should strengthen this shaky alliance. The astonished elves are confronted with the colossal carcasses of defeated monsters, mountains of the most valuable loot. Local hunters immediately get to work, demonstrating their skills in cutting up the prey. The tribe's strongmen never miss an opportunity to show off their strength to the refined forest dwellers. Deciding to show that they are no pushovers either, one of the forest warriors confidently takes a step forward. She raises her bone dagger, eager to prove that forest weapons are no less effective than the tools of outsiders. However, the vaunted weapon breaks with a crash against the super-strong skin, causing only awkward laughter among the stern northerners. Insulted by the ridicule, the forest maidens stubbornly clutch their primitive blades, ready to defend their pride to the last. The northerners merely condescendingly offer them the use of their simple but reliable stone axe. But the next moment, a blinding flash of pure energy cuts through the sky, causing everyone to freeze in horror. Right in front of them, a previously unseen high-tech alien spear plunges into the rocks, crushing them. It is a formidable weapon, capable of taming even the most dangerous creatures from the darkest depths of the ocean. Struck by the power of this technology, both the forest dwellers and the stern warriors of the north are speechless. Realizing the colossal difference in strength, the ruler of the forest people is forced to admit the superiority of the strangers over the formidable leader. The generous offer to share the spoils takes the forest maidens by surprise, sowing doubt among their ranks. Even seasoned northern hunters now look with embarrassment at their once formidable weapons. Chen Li sits on his throne with an air of absolute superiority, as if the entire world already belongs to him. His strength seems limitless and his will unwavering, causing everyone who dares to look at him to tremble. The forest tribe's ruler appears before the chieftain in person, trying to unravel the motives of this frightening stranger. Chen Li coldly states that his principles are simple, but woe to those who dare to stand in his way. Trying to discover the secret of his inhuman power, she asks how they managed to overcome the great herd. The formidable leader merely maintains a mysterious silence, hiding his true thoughts under a mask of greatness. But behind this flawless facade of an invincible leader lies tension bordering on panic. A severe wound received in battle begins to bleed treacherously, threatening to reveal his weakness. Chen Li's faithful companion desperately tries to distract her guest by offering ridiculous gifts and trying to talk her down. She smooths the edges as best she can, praying that the forest ruler doesn't notice the drop of blood on the floor. And although doubts still torment the soul of the proud elf, she decides to temporarily retreat, leaving the leader alone with his secrets. Her departure is accompanied by a warning about a hidden power that elves are not accustomed to displaying. However, the formidable leader only watches the guests with a cold, disdainful gaze from his bone throne. Only after leaving the chambers can the ruler's companions finally breathe a sigh of relief, taking with them the burden of unspoken things. The beastmen generously promise to share their spoils with their neighbors, demonstrating feigned friendliness and generosity. The farewell ends with a polite gesture, concealing a wary anticipation of inevitable changes. The Elven squad silently disappears under the canopy of a dense emerald forest, returning to their ancestral lands. But there is no peace in the eyes of the forest mistress. Her mind is tormented by dark thoughts and a premonition of an impending storm. At the border of their domain, loyal scouts are already waiting for them, ready to report on strange changes in the depths of the forest. Kneeling before the mistress, they hasten to tell about the amazing buildings that strangers call their homes. From their hiding place, they watched the first pathetic attempts to establish a life in a new, unknown land. The ruler's thoughts conjure up a picture of a primitive and absurd tribe, barely able to survive in the wild forest. But the next report from the intelligence officer makes her assistants shudder with amazement and fear. The news that these savages have mastered the sacred power of fire and use it for cooking seems incredible. The stunned ruler demands details, not believing that such primitive creatures are capable of such a thing. Dry counts on stone slabs confirm that the camp of the mysterious Chen Li numbers only a handful of survivors. Frustrated by her subjects' indecision, the elf sternly asks why they haven't conducted a thorough search. In response, she is shown a diagram of the enemy camp, tightly surrounded by vigilant patrols of beastmen. Understanding the complexity of the situation, the ruler plunges into deep thought, weighing every step. Mortally frightened by the mistress's wrath, the faithful servants bow their heads in anticipation of a harsh sentence. But instead of punishment, the mistress decisively draws her weapon, ready to personally reveal all the secrets of this forest. The stinging blows fall mercilessly on the guilty, painting the foliage in crimson tones. The punishment is severe, and every blow makes you shudder with unbearable pain. However, the mistress, showing unexpected mercy, stops the punishing hand. Bowing deeply, the loyal subjects, with tears in their eyes, thank her for the gift of life. At the same time, at the other end of these lands, in the very heart of the wild tribe, life goes on as usual. Chen Li, who has taken on the role of a powerful leader, tries to cope with an unfamiliar role. A charming companion with golden hair watches his every move closely. Enveloped in a soft, healing light, ancient magic obediently heals all past wounds. Seeing his miraculous healing, the girl cannot contain her sincere joy. Her embarrassed look and timid smile instantly made the stern warrior Chen Li lose all composure. Their temporary abode, hidden from prying eyes, lay beneath a peaceful sky. Finding themselves alone, they finally find common ground and come to an important agreement. The playful coquetry of the beautiful warrior ignites new sparks in their budding relationship. Through the mask of formidable savages, a sincere tenderness breaks through, making their hearts beat faster. But a sudden cry from a small tribesman interrupts this idyllic moment. The out-of-breath baby hurries to share important news with the newly appointed leader. Chen Li listens to him with the most serious and majestic look, trying to live up to his status. Although their every step from the forest thicket is still closely watched by strange, wary eyes, the guy just sighs resignedly, realizing how many worries have now fallen on his shoulders. But, having pulled himself together, he confidently declares that he is ready to protect his new home and every one of its inhabitants. Life in this primitive world begins to flourish, and even the smallest inhabitants are genuinely delighted by the long-awaited changes. The tribe works hard to build their new home, while Chen Li watches the work going on around them. The allies look warmly to their leader, ready to follow him into this bright future. Chen Li himself only smiles confidently, feeling how people's faith in his powers is growing stronger. True, it is not so easy to establish contact with everyone, and some forest dwellers still look at him with extreme suspicion. Finally reaching his hut, the exhausted boy falls onto the straw, but the system does not allow him to relax for a second. A new task appears before his eyes. In just 11 days, he must officially create a tribe and expand it to 50 people. But a sudden system alert makes Chen Li jump in surprise. His trusty weapon underwent a mysterious upgrade, transforming into Pongu's own legendary axe. Looking at the projection hovering in the air, the hero tries to comprehend the scale of what happened. He extends his hand, and the space is distorted by digital interference, materializing a formidable weapon. The stats are astounding, but the price for awakening the hidden skill is frighteningly high, a bloody sacrifice. The boy realizes that it was his accidental wound and spilled blood that awakened this incredible destructive force. But this power conceals a mortal danger that can exhaust the user to the very end. Yet, holding the transformed weapon in his hands, Chenli is amazed at how his equipment is capable of evolving. A thought immediately arises in his head: are other types of weapons in this world capable of such a transformation? Having lowered the axe to the ground, the guy thoughtfully peers into the light streaming through the cracks. He remembers all the crazy trials and wild animals that he has already had to tame on this thorny path. But far more dangerous opponents await him ahead, lurking in the uncharted wilderness of ancient forests. Time is running out, and Chenli has exactly 11 days left to prepare the tribe for the inevitable clash. To speed up the preparations, the chief sends a messenger for his best hunter. Siang, a loyal comrade and experienced fighter, accepts this call without further ado. Together with their little helper, they hurry back to the tribe's camp. An out-of-breath boy runs into the camp, screaming at the top of his lungs to attract the chief's attention. He bows before the entrance to the ruler's hut, hastening to report the arrival of the warrior. Chenli, lost in his thoughts, slowly turns to meet the arrivals. The little messenger looks at his leader with awe, ready to carry out any new assignment. Having received the order, he instantly takes off from the spot, running away as fast as he can. And Chenli himself is once again left alone with his thoughts, realizing that every day he lives brings them closer to the denouement. A sudden realization makes him startle. The merciless timer of fate continues its countdown. The world around them is changing rapidly, putting human survival at even greater risk. There are now only 9 days left from the previous 11, and there is no more time for mistakes. The young man spends every free second creating new tools and weapons that can save his people. After all, he faces a clear and stern task: to strengthen the camp and unite a strong tribe around himself. On the wooden floor in front of him, blanks for future hunting and defense devices are multiplying. Early successes bring much-needed technology points, opening up new opportunities for development. Images of his comrades and future warriors, whom he will have to teach the art of war, come to life in his memory. Even the simplest of tips, in skilled hands, can become a crushing force capable of splitting stones. And while the adults are preparing for the worst, the new generation of the tribe is already training hard to the point of exhaustion. Hearing the sounds of intense training coming from outside, Chenli looks forward to the future of his people with hope. At that moment, Ayu timidly approaches him, her heart beating faster just by looking at her leader. Chenli warmly thanks the girl for her care and devotion, which warms his soul in the face of the coming trials. With tenderness and barely concealed trepidation, she helps the chieftain put on his marching attire. Donning his cloak, Chenli is ready to go out to his people, feeling the weight of responsibility for every life entrusted to him. The appearance of the leader immediately attracts the attention of his fellow tribesmen, who were awaiting his decision. His comrades rush to share the good news with him, interrupting each other with the delight that overwhelms them. Pointing proudly forward, one of the warriors hurries to show the result of their joint, hard work. The leader sees the tribe's first real building, a strong wooden dwelling. Although the work appears rather crude and simple, Chenli is genuinely pleased with this first step toward civilization. The rejoicing of the tribesmen knows no bounds, because now they finally have their own, reliable shelter. The builders proudly display even the smallest details, such as a hastily woven straw door. At this moment, a system interface flashes before the leader's eyes, announcing the completion of the wooden house and the receipt of new technology points. Chenli's eyes widen as he suddenly realized the enormity of what was happening. He begins to understand that these simple actions trigger much deeper processes in their very nature. Such development is not just about finding a roof over one's head, but a powerful impetus that accelerates the evolution of its entire people. Having given new instructions, the leader makes it clear that this is only the beginning of their great journey. Chenli is lost in his thoughts, trying to calculate every next step to strengthen the tribe's position, but the silence of reflection is interrupted by the hasty appearance of one of the sentries. A breathless little messenger runs into the camp, shouting that an important target has finally been found. Barely catching his breath, the boy prepares to convey to the leader information that could change their future destiny forever. Chenli only smiles indulgently, seeing how devoted the few who remained by his side are to him. A fleeting joy finally reigned in their humble camp, causing the stern warriors to momentarily forget their past hardships. Having gathered his loyal comrades around him, the young leader prepares to announce a plan that will decide their future fate. His eyes glow with the confidence of a man who has calculated every possible move of his enemy in advance. He firmly declares that the time for idle waiting is over, and a time has come to act. The little assistant happily picks up his words, ready to rush to carry out any order without hesitation. Having handed over a scroll with secret instructions to a loyal warrior, Chen Li entrusts him with a most important mission. The leader's simple and sincere comrades are inspired by his trust, realizing that their hopes are finally beginning to come true. But Chen Li himself knows that the real battle is still ahead, and he must not relax under any circumstances. Meanwhile, a mysterious figure lurked in the shadows of the tree branches, patiently waiting for the performance to begin. After seeing his men off, Chen Li bids them a warm farewell as he sends the squad off into the unknown. Returning to his wounded comrades, he bitterly admits that now the strength of everyone is important, even those who can barely stand on their feet. Turning to his beautiful companion, the leader delicately discusses with her preparations for the next stage of their plan. Having secured her unconditional support, Chen Li thoughtfully turns his gaze to the horizon, because the bait had been thrown out a couple of days ago. In the dense forest thicket, an enemy detachment slowly advances, not even suspecting that they are already following a trail left especially for them. Suddenly, a frightened girl appears at the borders of someone else's land, collecting wild fruits. Upon seeing the strangers, she instantly understands the enormous danger looming over their peaceful community. Panicked, the poor thing abandons the harvested crop and runs back as fast as she can to warn her people. She flies into the main shelter, gasping with horror and trying to report the uninvited guests as quickly as possible. But Chief Chen Li, seated on his throne, greets this news with the calm of a predator who knows for sure that the victim has walked into his trap. In fact, at that moment, the leader was indulging in sweet dreams of a carefree life surrounded by beautiful maidens. He already imagined himself bathed in luxury and affection, far from any worries and wars. However, a loud knock on the gate instantly pulls him out of the fantasy world and back into harsh reality. Chen Li quickly pulls himself together, adopting a stern look befitting a formidable ruler. Meanwhile, at the entrance, his faithful assistant greets the leader of the forest tribe with feigned respect. The guest is politely invited inside, and the simple hut is solemnly called a royal palace. The forest queen only raised an eyebrow in surprise at such pathos, not believing her ears. A condescending smirk appears on her face. She is convinced that these savages are simply trying to pull the wool over her eyes. The mistress anticipates an easy victory and rich booty, which she will take from these fools. To cement her superiority, she displays an impressive squad of formidable warriors behind her, but the host can barely contain their laughter as they watch these futile attempts at intimidation. A slight hesitation runs between the rivals for a moment, creating an invisible tension. The chief's assistant invites guests to take any gifts they want, as if the wealth of their tribe had no limits. Amazed by such generosity, the queen begins to doubt the weakness of her opponents. Casting aside any unnecessary hesitation, she orders her retinue to follow her. With heads held high, the delegation takes a step towards the unknown. But as soon as she steps over the threshold, the leader freezes in place, struck by the majestic appearance of Chen Li on his bone throne. Trying to hide the overwhelming embarrassment and awe she felt before this power, she awkwardly justifies her surprise. Chen Li immediately notices her confusion and interest in their unique buildings, realizing that the fish has taken the bait. With a victorious smile on his face, he prepares to play his main card in this diplomatic game. The green-haired warrior looms over him, her commanding silhouette radiating primal menace and unshakable confidence. She comes closer, and her cold gaze clearly shows her intention to teach the impudent guest a lesson. With one sharp movement, she swings the whip, cutting through the air with a whistle that makes her ears pop. A sharp spike passed just millimeters from Chen Li's face, causing him to freeze for a moment. The guy barely manages to dodge, mentally cursing the unpredictable nature of this forest predator. But instead of retreating, the guest takes a bold step forward, completely subjugating the space. She looks down at him with undisguised contempt, demonstrating her superiority with her whole appearance. The cold blade of a bone dagger touches his chin, and a triumphant, dangerous smile plays on her lips. Chen Li feels the blood rush to his face, but he stubbornly refuses to show his fear in the face of mortal threat. However, the harsh confrontation quickly loses its pathos, turning into a funny duel of stubborn characters. Even the menacing spirit of the wild beast gives way to the awkwardness that hangs between them. And yet, tightly entangled in thorny vines, Chen Li finds himself in the rather unenviable position of a prisoner. His imagination is already painting the darkest pictures of his own end, because old wounds are still making themselves felt. But the dramatic moment is interrupted by a sudden visit. A messenger appears on the threshold with an announcement about the beginning of the feast. The captive is unceremoniously dragged towards the celebration, completely ignoring his wounded manhood. Only at the very exit do the bonds finally fall away, returning the guy's long-awaited freedom of movement. Trying to salvage the last of his pride, Chenli pulls himself together and generously invites everyone to the table. His amazing resilience and ability to take a hit do not go unnoticed by the stern leader. A new, much deeper interest in this strange, unyielding man flashes in her eyes. Now, by the hot festive fire, a completely different stage of their difficult negotiations begins. Surrounded by her jubilant relatives, the Forest Queen obediently steps towards the common hearth, where they are already eagerly awaiting her. To cement his success, Chenli generously shares the main secret of any good dish, a pinch of rare and precious salt. The treats are immediately shared, causing sincere gratitude on the faces of the forest dwellers. The queen stands in amazement as she sees how delightedly her subjects accept food from the hands of strangers. She still tries to maintain her grandeur, but it is becoming increasingly difficult to resist the enticing aroma. Chenli only silently watches her doubts, knowing that no one can resist his culinary skills. And indeed, the very first piece makes the stern ruler forget all her pride. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, other hunters play their silent and dangerous game. A herd of mighty beasts, marked with a mysterious neon glow, comes into their field of vision. Hiding in the dense undergrowth, the warriors freeze, waiting for the perfect moment to attack. The unsuspecting giants continue their peaceful grazing in the sun-drenched clearing. But a sudden column of black smoke rising into the sky serves as the long-awaited order to begin the hunt. The hunters exchange short signals, preparing their simple but deadly weapons. With a sharp whistle, heavy spears pierce flesh, instantly disturbing the peace of the forest giants. Maddened by pain, the animals change their color to an ominous crimson and rush forward in an unstoppable avalanche. In the path of this furious torrent stands only one young warrior, ready to meet the danger head-on. The leader's bloodshot eyes are directed straight at the daring daredevil who dared to block his path. The seconds are compressed to the limit as the enraged monster makes its crushing charge. But the guy acts without hesitation, making a precise and lightning-fast attack straight into the enemy's vulnerable spot. Mounted on the enraged giant, the young hunter loudly claims this incredible prey. The mysterious forest maiden watches from above, hiding an enigmatic smile. Meanwhile, the mad chaos only escalates. The enraged herd rushes forward, dragging the brave rider along with it. Every step these giants take shakes the earth, threatening to crush anyone in their path. But the little warrior holds on with all his might, refusing to give in to the furious beast. Watching from their hiding place, fellow tribesmen realize with horror that the situation has gotten completely out of control. They are trying to understand why their plan failed at the most crucial moment. The sound of an alarming whistle spreads over the thicket, trying to stop this mad, uncontrolled flight. However, the rider no longer hears the calls, completely focused on taming his ferocious steed. And when it seems that a fall is inevitable, at the very last moment true horsemanship awakens. A swift stream of living power makes its way through the dense thickets of the ancient forest. At the same time, a fire burns peacefully in the quiet abode, promising long-awaited peace after a long hunt. The villagers feast happily, enjoying the bountiful spoils, while Chenli keeps aloof. His sharp gaze is directed into the distance, as if sensing the imminent approach of a new threat. The anxious behavior of the forest birds only confirms his worst fears. The peaceful celebration is suddenly interrupted when anxiety begins to grow among the noise of voices. The ruler's attention is drawn to a breathless messenger who bursts into the camp from the forest. She runs as fast as she can, carrying news of an impending disaster that could destroy their fragile world. Unable to stay on her feet from fear and fatigue, the messenger falls right at the feet of her queen. The mistress of the forest people looks sternly at her frightened subject, demanding an immediate explanation. Through tears and panic, the unfortunate woman tries to utter the words that will forever change their usual way of life. The realization of the impending catastrophe makes the lady's heart clench with rage and anxiety. Without wasting a second, she and her warriors rush to where the real carnage is unfolding. The forest abode is filled with chaos. Bloodthirsty horned monsters mercilessly destroy everything in their path, sparing no defenseless inhabitants. Enormous monsters drive the survivors into a trap, cutting off any means of escape. With the last of their strength, the forest defenders try to hold back the enemy's onslaught, using primitive weapons. However, stones thrown from slingshots only anger the ferocious creatures more, without causing them any noticeable harm. Realizing the futility of long-range combat, the fearless warriors decide to take a desperate step. Clutching short blades in their hands, they rush into close combat, ready to give their lives to save their sisters. But the difference in strength is too great. With one crushing blow, the monster scatters the attackers in different directions. Finding herself on the ground, facing imminent death, The wounded girl stands helplessly frozen under the heavy gaze of the monster. A giant fist, imbued with primal rage, is raised for the final, deadly blow. The desperate cries of the tribeswoman echo throughout the forest, but no one manages to come to the rescue. The unfortunate woman closes her eyes in resignation and covers her face with her hands, silently saying goodbye to life. The deadly swing is suddenly interrupted. The beast's attention is drawn to a new, much more dangerous threat. The ruler herself appears on the battlefield, ready to personally punish those who dared to shed the blood of her people. In her hands, a formidable weapon comes to life, a strong, thorny vine capable of crushing any enemy. With lightning speed, the lady delivers a crushing blow, swirling the monster in a furious whirlwind. The mighty beast falls to the ground with a crash, unable to withstand the wrath of the forest queen. However, this victory does not come so easily. The wounded predator only becomes more inflamed, emitting a deafening roar. Stamping his hoof furiously, the enraged monster prepares for a decisive counterattack. The fragile defender of the forest fearlessly rushes to intercept the monster, hoping to hold back its onslaught. However, the enraged beast's power proves devastating. Her weapon shatters into pieces with the very first blow. The forest air trembled with her cry of pain and despair. Collapsing to the ground, the wounded warrior barely finds the strength to breathe, barely holding back the overwhelming weakness. Pain pierces her body, making it impossible for her to even get to her feet. Finding herself in Chenli's safe hands, she tries to appear strong, assuring that she is fine. In a trembling voice, she tells of the herd's sudden madness, while the other savages look away guiltily. At that moment, Chenli comes face to face with the leader, and an invisible but suffocating clash of wills hangs in the air. The monster roars deafeningly, trying to suppress the insolent one with its wild, primeval authority. But instead of fear, he sees only cold determination, forcing the beast itself to take an uncertain step back. Chenli lunges forward, locking the creature's path with the heavy blade of his axe. Looking down on his enemy, he remarks with a grin that the new leader of the herd is still very far from the greatness of the former king. A shadow of doubt and fear runs across the leader's powerful body for the first time under this piercing gaze. With an excited smile, the young man announces to his enemies that since they have come here, there is no turning back for them. And, as if in response to the challenge, new, even more ferocious giants emerge from the forest thicket to meet the heroes. But the natives have no intention of hiding behind others' backs. Clutching their weapons, they rush into battle as a united front. A fierce battle ensues, where the fire of torches and the steel of spears clash with the impenetrable hide of the monsters. The appearance of the true king of the bulls makes even the most seasoned warriors of the tribe shudder. The deadly titan looms over the defenders, ready to crush any who dare stand in its way. At this decisive moment, the allies clasp hands tightly, ready to stand by each other until the very end. But suddenly, a desperate fighter, ready to do the impossible, falls from the sky onto the monster. Riding the furious creature, he makes it roar in surprise and pain. The system instantly recognizes this insane triumph, awakening a new rare riding skill in the hero. Having crashed into the thick of the battle, this unstoppable tandem begins to sow chaos among the enemy ranks, giving the defenders a long-awaited respite. Looking at this spectacle, the elf can barely contain her amazement. Realizing that the battle is not yet lost, Chenli slowly turns away, ready to make the next important decision in this endless war. Their hands touch for a moment, sealing a silent union in the face of imminent danger. He looks at her with a confidence that can instill hope in even the most wounded heart. There is no doubt on Chenli's face, only a cold determination to see things through to the end. The exhausted, bleeding elf sees this look and finds the strength to take the last step. Devastation reigns all around. Wounded comrades desperately try to save themselves while the battle continues to devour their home. The worried allies look anxiously into the face of their leader, awaiting the fateful order. Through the pain and fatigue, a dark fire of defiance towards fate flares up in her eyes. Raising her hand, she calls on everyone to gather their strength for the final push. And although their relationship once began with mutual mistrust in captivity, they are now bound by bonds of true camaraderie. At that moment, a desperate call to retreat sounds, echoing across the battlefield. The commanders rush the survivors, realizing that every second counts, and there is no time to waste. The elf firmly declares that she will stay to cover the rear to give the others a chance to escape unharmed. Leading behind their faithful comrades, the survivors rush away with heavy hearts. And behind them, an avalanche of enraged monsters crashes into the ranks of the defenders with a roar, beginning the last, most brutal battle. Courageous warriors call on their comrades to stand to the last, holding back the enemy onslaught. Every second of delay can cost the lives of those trying to escape. In a furious rush, the defenders rush forward, ready to take the brunt of the attack. The tribe's hunters follow their leaders into this deadly battle without hesitation. Even in the face of superior enemy forces, their resolve is strong, and their faith in victory unshakable. Merciless monsters unleash all their primal fury on those who dare to block their path. Meanwhile, the surviving members of the tribe hastily retreat into the depths of unknown lands. Tired, wounded, and having lost their former home, they find it difficult to find the strength to move on. Finally, a temporary shelter appears on the horizon, capable of protecting the unfortunate from adversity. Those rescued remember with gratitude those who spared no effort to speed up the construction of these modest huts. Women and the wounded are carefully distributed among new homes, trying to give everyone at least a modicum of peace. Having crossed the threshold of the temporary shelter, they can finally catch their breath away from the horrors of war. The faithful companion turns to her queen, trying to console her wounded soul. With a heavy sigh, she draws the curtain, leaving the ruler alone with her sad thoughts. But we can't indulge in sadness for long. There are still too many unresolved issues ahead. Heading to the neighboring dwelling, she visits Chen Li, who is recovering from a difficult battle. Noticing the guest, the exhausted young man raises his head, ready to hear the latest news about the survivors. Chen Li grimly realizes that this fragile peace has come at too high a price. And yet, the sincere gratitude in the girl's eyes makes his stern face soften for a moment. Life in the camp is gradually getting better, but the clouds over their new home continue to gather. The camp security remains on high alert, as the safety of their new home is paramount. But even in the midst of harsh everyday life, there is room for simple, sincere smiles and friendly teasing. However, not everyone is reassured by this temporary lull. Alarming signs of nature make us look to the sky in search of an approaching storm. But everyday worries unceremoniously burst into these gloomy thoughts. Life dictates its own rules, forcing us to put aside philosophical thoughts for the sake of pressing matters. Meanwhile, in the very heart of the camp, behind the walls of the chieftain's house, much more important issues are being decided. Chen Li, immersed in calculations, carefully studies the system interface, weighing each step. On his shoulders lies the burden of responsibility for everyone who has entrusted their lives to him in his wild world. A sudden knock interrupts his thoughts, causing the glowing screens to roll up. Unexpected guests, whose visit he had been waiting for so long, appear on the threshold. The queen of another tribe comes with a decision that could forever change the balance of power in these lands. There is no fear in her gaze, only the firm determination of a leader ready to do anything to save her people. But an alliance with Chen Li never comes for free, and she understands this very well. The young chieftain slowly rises from his bone throne, casting an appraising glance at his guest. His every movement exudes strength and unshakable confidence in his own superiority. Instead of wasting words, he makes a sharp attack, testing the reaction of his new ally. The sharp blade freezes a few centimeters away from her, demanding unquestioning obedience. An invisible spark of tension instantly flares up between two strong personalities. Chen Li leans closer, making it clear that in this alliance, he alone will dictate the rules. Chen Li literally burns her with his gaze, making her feel the full weight of his superiority. She tries to object, her voice trembling with impotent anger and fear of the inevitable. But her protests fall on deaf ears. The young man remains cold and adamant to her pleas. Mutual distrust still hangs in the air, but now they have a common goal for which they will have to coexist. Taking a deep breath, she decides to trust his plan, hoping that this won't be her last mistake. Together, they leave the semi-darkness of the shelter, stepping towards the unknown. Outside, the tribe is already gathering, obediently heading towards the general gathering place. Chen Li and his companion blend into the crowd, trying not to attract unnecessary attention. The focus is on a formidable warrior, whose primal strength inspires fear in those around him. With a cry of victory, the giant declares his right to power, challenging any daredevil. And this challenge is accepted. A fearless warrior comes out to meet him, ready to fight until her last breath. Drawing her bone blades, she takes a fighting stance against her larger opponent. Exchanging determined glances, the fighters understand that there will be no mercy in this fight. The deadly dance begins instantly, filling the air with the whistle of cutting flesh. The girl rises into the air, making a swift lunge and trying to impose her own pace of combat on her opponent. Watching this confrontation from the crowd, Chen Li carefully assesses the strength and techniques of the local fighters. The warrior's huge axe barely deflects the first attack, forcing the giant to realize the full danger of the situation. But a slight wound only inflames his fighting spirit, forcing him to move even faster. The warrior's next lightning-fast blow hits the target, splitting the enemy's strong mask. Enraged by this failure, the giant unleashes a crushing blow from above, intending to end the duel in one fell swoop. But in the midst of a fierce battle, when the outcome seems predetermined, an unexpected threat comes from the outside. A swift, elusive attack interrupts the giant's onslaught, forcing him to retreat in rage under the pressure of an unknown force. However, the enraged warrior has no intention of letting her prey go and makes another reckless dash forward. She rushes towards her goal, not noticing how the insidious trap is already slamming shut right in front of her nose. Enemy bonds bind her body, restricting her movements and turning her recent triumph into a desperate struggle for freedom. Breaking free from the grip, she lunges at the silent Chen Li, hoping to reach him with her blades. But this mad attack is closely watched from above by a vigilant guard, ready to bring down inevitable punishment on the attacker. Chen Li doesn't even flinch, his cold and penetrating gaze directed straight at the approaching threat. In an instant, a sparkling spear, thrown by the defender's precise hand, pierces the daring raider right through. A brutal blow cuts off her attack, causing her to choke on her own blood and release the weapon. The warrior's lifeless body collapses onto the dry ground, raising clouds of dust under the gaze of the small shooter. The defeat of their strongest fighter plunges the attackers into shock, which is instantly replaced by uncontrollable, blazing anger. Rallying around their wounded comrade, the Amazon tribe draws its blades, ready to stand to the very end. The tip of the bone knife points straight towards Chen Li, demanding immediate retribution for the bloodshed. The situation is escalating to the limit, and it seems that a bloody massacre in this clearing can no longer be avoided. The tension in the air is literally cut with a knife. Both sides are frozen one step away from the outbreak of a full-scale war. The village's defenders form a human shield, ready to meet the enraged savages face to face. Every ally is tense to the limit, waiting for just one sign to rush into a merciless fight. Those around him look at their leader with hope and fear, awaiting his final word. Chen Li understands that he bears a huge responsibility, and the slightest mistake could lead to irreparable disaster. The enemy is cunning, and Chen Li has a precious hostage in his hands that could change the entire course of this confrontation. But tensions only mount when they come face to face with the tribe's fierce warriors. The green-haired leader of the elves furiously accuses her enemies of meanness, unwilling to forgive such dirty methods of fighting. However, the price of this brutal battle turns out to be exorbitant. One of their comrades is seriously wounded and is on the brink of life and death. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Chen Li and his companions hastily retreat, leaving the battlefield behind. A crushing despair reigns in the camp. The life of a loyal comrade is fading with every second, and there is almost no hope of salvation left. Chen Li listens silently to the bitter truth about the wounded woman's condition, realizing that only he can turn back fate. From the leader's lips comes a quiet voice, full of suppressed tears, calling for his mercy. Broken by grief, she falls to her knees, begging to save the one whose loyalty and courage deserve a chance to live. Our hero is plunged into deep thought, because the price of such a choice is incredibly high. Within him, stubborn pragmatism struggles with a sincere desire to act according to conscience, despite all the risks. A stern reminder from the system flashes before his eyes. He has only one final dose of a rare healing potion left. To give this treasure to a stranger means to leave oneself without protection at the most critical moment of the future journey. But looking at the elf bowing before him, Chen Li makes a decision that defines him as a true leader. He confidently approaches the dying warrior, ready to perform a miracle. Chen Li summons magical essence, and a warm green light envelops the girl's lifeless body. The mortal wound is healing before our eyes, bringing life back to where darkness reigned just a moment ago. Those around freeze in silent amazement, not believing their own eyes and the rescue that took place before their eyes. The rescued elves express their endless gratitude to Chen Li, recognizing him as a great ally. And this noble act forever changes the attitude of the forest people towards the stranger, igniting the spark of a new, unbreakable friendship. Now all the forest people bow before their savior, seeing in him a true miracle that came down from heaven. Chen Li looks warmly at the elven leader, who no longer hides her sincere gratitude. His uncontrollable laughter echoes throughout the area, replacing the previous tension with a moment of pure, uninhibited joy. Surrounded by their kind, they stand shoulder to shoulder, feeling something much more than just an alliance being born between them. The girl timidly looks up at him, preparing to voice her most cherished and, perhaps, last request. A gentle smile blossoms on her face, full of hope for a new life together. At this moment, Chen Li's imagination paints incredibly sweet, enticing pictures of their shared future. Before his mind's eye flashes a magnificent wedding, the exchange of vows, and an unforgettable first wedding night. He already imagines how they will have a beautiful daughter, whom they will raise in peace and harmony, how they will welcome guests together and share the joys of simple, everyday life, and how, having passed through many years, they will meet deep old age without losing their tender affection. But the sudden realization of the inevitable ending makes the guy deeply moved and shed comical tears. Unable to contain his overwhelming emotions, Chen-Li hugs the girl tightly, stunning her with his intensity. The stunned elf obediently freezes in his arms, feeling the warmth of his hands and sincere care. Finally, turning to the tribe, the hero loudly announces the imminent celebration of their sacred union. At that very moment, a system notification flashes before his eyes, congratulating him on the creation of his own clan. The offer to choose a suitable name forces the newly appointed leader to seriously consider the fate of his people. After a brief, slightly awkward hesitation, Chen-Li makes his final decision, leaving his companion puzzled by his behavior. The system instantly approves the new name, setting it the large-scale task of expanding and strengthening its borders. And now, driven by great ambitions, he is ready to subjugate this entire wild world for the sake of the prosperity of his tribe. However, the harsh realities of leadership hit Chen-Li on his very first day, forcing him to hide his face from his own subjects in embarrassment. His strange behavior immediately attracts the attention of local residents, who are puzzled by such a sharp change in the leader's mood. Rumors that the newly appointed ruler has lost his mind from the power that has fallen upon him instantly spread among his fellow tribesmen. Chen-Li understands how dangerous this world is, because around every corner there are terrible creatures waiting to tear him apart. The deadly threat approaches him with a mad grin, leaving no chance for a tactical retreat. Finding himself alone with his worst nightmare, the young man can barely contain his panic, feeling completely helpless. On top of that, the system presents new shocking details about his surroundings, which completely confuse him. But before he can come to his senses, a gigantic shadow appears right in front of him, covering the entire sky. Before him appears a mighty giantess, whose formidable and muscular build is completely at odds with her appearance. Her pure and naive gaze leaves Chen-Li completely confused, making him wonder what other crazy surprises this land has in store for him. Caught in the grip of this incredible power, Chen-Li could only look up in confusion, trying to comprehend the scale of the problems that had befallen him. When she innocently started talking about the mysterious wedding ceremony, the guy finally realized that he had found himself in the epicenter of someone's crazy expectations. One careless word, and the delighted giantess instantly explodes into a storm of irresistible emotions. She lifts him into the air with the lightness of a feather, not caring at all how ridiculous and helpless he looks at that moment. The attempts of the companion who arrived in time to calm the heated warrior and remind her of the need to give the wounded man rest initially bear no fruit. Ignoring his timid protests, an unstoppable force carries Chen-Li away like a trophy that cannot be refused. Only when the giantess's ardor wanes a little and her friend rushes to warn her fellow tribesmen does the situation finally acquire a semblance of order. Realizing that things have gone too far, Chen-Li decides to stop this cycle of misunderstanding by decisively blocking the warrior's path. Now he faces a much more difficult and delicate task, finding the right moment to announce the dissolution of this absurd engagement. And, watching his departing allies, he slowly heads towards the foreign camp, ready to meet any upcoming difficulties face to face. The morning at the new camp begins with the first rays of the sun and the ringing cries of the local fauna, awakening the sleeping surroundings. Chen-Li steps out to face the new day, stretching sweetly after a hard night of reflection. Life is already in full swing around here. The guests from the tribe are hard at work, dragging heavy logs to strengthen the camp. Looking at the map of the area in his interface, he is surprised by how quickly the new arrivals have settled in and started helping the camp. And yet, despite the general harmony, the guy's soul still feels uneasy. Throwing on a cloak, he slowly walks along the huts, observing the bustle and catching curious glances. The women of the tribe greet him with deep respect, respectfully calling him their king. One of the girls hurriedly approaches him, wanting to tell him something important. Bowing slightly, she invites Chen-Li to follow her, promising to show him something interesting. Having agreed, he obediently follows, not realizing what unexpected meeting awaits him ahead. The guide leads him to a picturesque pond, where a beautiful green-haired elf is serenely bathing in the rays of the morning sun. Embarrassedly responding to the bows of the other residents, Chen-Li tries with all his might to avert his gaze from such a revealing sight. Noticing the guest, the green-haired beauty is not at all embarrassed and with a flirtatious smile asks if some urgent matter has brought him to her. The guy immediately starts making excuses, gesturing awkwardly and feeling the color rise in his face. Trying to maintain at least a shred of royal dignity, he sits down on the shore, trying to speak as casually as possible. But the elf just playfully bites her finger, enjoying his obvious confusion and clearly planning some kind of mischief. Her ambiguous looks make Chen Li completely lose his composure, mentally begging for mercy. Trying to steer the subject to a safer direction, he admits with a forced smile that he still doesn't even know her name. The girl squints slyly, instantly figuring out his cunning maneuver to save her own modesty, and she only smiles mysteriously in response, leaving the embarrassed king completely perplexed by her unyielding charm. Her gentle, yet mysterious smile seems to bewitch, drawing you into the depths of age-old secrets. But her revelation about the former ruler who gave her her name makes Chen Li instantly wary. The realization of this tribe's wild customs plunges the young man into a real shock, forcing him to clutch his head from the absurdity of what is happening. Your gaze involuntarily falls on the giant praying mantises that inhabit these lands, and a frightening question about the fate of the queen's past chosen ones ripens in your head. After all, everyone knows the cruel nature of these creatures, who devour their partners after the mating ritual. The mere thought of such an unenviable fate literally makes Chen Li shudder, trying to wrap himself more tightly in his cloak. However, the forest maiden only smiles condescendingly, finding such savage methods too inelegant. Moreover, she has only recently ascended the throne and has not yet found a betrothed, which gives the hero a momentary sense of relief. Hurrying to say goodbye, Chen Li takes his leave hastily, wanting to get away from this enchanting danger as quickly as possible. But a flirtatious shout from behind makes him freeze, wiping the relieved smile that had just appeared from his face. An ambiguous smile, concealing a hidden threat, plays again on the lips of the beautiful queen. Her gentle warning about what will happen to anyone who dares to offend her chills the young man to the very bones. And this cold look leaves no doubt you definitely shouldn't joke around with this girl. A sharp stone axe chops the juicy fruits with a dull crack, returning the hero to the harsh reality of everyday life. Life in the settlement goes on as usual, and the tribesmen are busy with their daily chores under the watchful eye of their leader. Chen Li sighed heavily, realizing how much work still needed to be put into setting up this primitive camp, and the pop-up system window relentlessly reminds him he has only 7 days left to expand his tribe and build strong dwellings. But when real giants, capable of carrying centuries-old logs single-handedly, join the work, the task no longer seems so impossible. The loyal warrior smiles openly at the leader, showing complete readiness to follow him to the very end. And Chen Li, gathering his will into a fist, resolutely looks forward. After all, the fate of an entire nation now rests on his shoulders. While the tribesmen are busy setting up a new home, a guy goes on a reconnaissance mission to the coast, where a terrible discovery awaits him. Hiding in the dense undergrowth, Chen Li carefully assesses the situation. He immediately recognizes the fallen creatures as representatives of the Sibei tribe. The entire sandy shore is literally strewn with the lifeless bodies of blue-skinned warriors. In these wild lands, danger can lurk behind every bush, and you can't relax for a moment. Peering carefully through the foliage, the young man tries to unravel the reason for this carnage. Feathered scavengers are already scurrying around the lifeless bodies. With a deafening cry, they divide the spoils right at the mouth of a huge fallen monster. The most daring little bird spreads its wings with delight, as if boasting of its victory. Chen Li watches this ridiculous spectacle with slight bewilderment. But since the birds are feasting with impunity in the open, it means there are no enemies nearby. Having descended to the water, the young man bends over one of the dead. Touching the fresh wounds, he realizes that the battle took place very recently. However, the nature of the deep cuts indicates that the creatures tore each other with their own claws. Assessing the scale of the tragedy, Chen Li realizes that a mad feud has broken out here. He could really use the surviving warriors to win them over to his side. But suddenly, one strange detail catches his attention. There are absolutely no wounds on the body, washed by the surf at the very edge of the water. It looks like the poor fellow died of excruciating suffocation before he could even reach dry land. A puzzled Chen Li carefully examined the lifeless body, trying to figure out the reason for this mysterious death. However, he had no time to think at all, as the silence of the coast was suddenly broken by an alarmed cry. A boy named Shang, scared to death, ran towards him as fast as he could, desperately gesturing with his hands. From his confused cries, Chen Li learned with horror that their settlement had been raided by maddened warriors from the Sibei tribe. Realizing the seriousness of the threat looming over the camp, the young man clenched his teeth in rage. Without wasting a second, he jumped up and rushed towards danger, ready to protect his allies. Meanwhile, right near the village, a handful of defenders had already blocked the path of the attackers, who had emerged straight from the depths of the ocean. Realizing that the numerical superiority was not on their side, the commanders urged the soldiers to conserve their strength and hold the defense to the last. The enemies advanced in an endless stream, and even deep wounds from spears did not force these blue-skinned monsters to retreat. Eyewitnesses whispered in horror that the attackers seemed to have lost their minds and felt no pain at all. The monsters formed a ring around the camp's defenders, depriving them of any room to maneuver. To the sound of wild, bestial roars, the mad horde launched a decisive attack, attempting to drag the warriors into the depths of the waters. But at the most critical moment, when it seemed that the battle was lost, a warning cry was heard from above. Shells rained down from the skies like a deadly rain, bringing death to the uninvited guests. A crushing hail of blows fell directly on the fleeing ranks of soulless creatures. Explosions and cries of pain tore through the attackers, causing them to recoil under the onslaught of this unexpected force. The defenders immediately took advantage of the enemy's confusion and rushed into a counterattack with renewed vigor. The faces of the tired warriors finally showed smiles of relief. Their queen had come in person to turn the tide of the battle. However, looking around the battlefield, the leader who had arrived to help froze in deep bewilderment. She could not understand why the inhabitants of the distant southern coast suddenly went so far north and turned into uncontrollable monsters. The tension grew with each passing second as the defenders stared into the monsters' faces, distorted with anger. The creatures roared furiously, ready to tear apart anyone who stood in their way. A horde of merciless monsters rapidly filled the coast, leaving no hope for a peaceful outcome. But the northern tribe was not going to give up without a fight, tightly clutching the simple weapons in their hands. With wild cries, the mad creatures rushed forward, anticipating a quick reprisal. The defenders rallied, ready to withstand the crushing blow of superior enemy forces. The clash was fierce and merciless, steel and bone met in a bloody dance. Amidst this chaos, the elf Xiao Wang tried in vain to hold back the onslaught of the enraged enemies. She still hoped to appeal to their reason, but these monsters were no longer capable of dialogue. Realizing the futility of her words, she swung her whip, putting all her remaining will into the blow. However, one of the pack leaders, enraged by her resistance, swung his arm to strike back. The air around her shook from the crushing force of this attack, leaving the girl no chance to dodge. In the monster's mad eyes burned only bloodlust and blind primal rage. The deadly claw was already rushing towards the defenseless target, ready to end its life in an instant. But at the very last moment, a heavy axe blocked the path of this irresistible force. The deafening sound of weapons clashing echoed across the battlefield, causing the earth to shake. In front of Xiao Wan, the powerful figure of Chen Li appeared, his unwavering gaze radiating absolute confidence. Having ordered his ally to retreat immediately, the young man prepared to take the full brunt of the blow. With unprecedented ease, he parried the giant's next furious attack, causing him to stagger. Now Chen Li stood alone against the terrifying enemy, assessing his power and preparing to deliver the decisive blow. But suddenly, a new threat erupts on the battlefield, causing the allies to shudder in fear of another monster attack. Fortunately, loyal comrades are not going to stand aside, furiously rushing to the defense of their leader. Chen Li barely has time to react to this unexpected, yet so timely outburst of devotion. The savages are ready to fight to the death, declaring that they will not allow anyone to harm their leader. Feeling the reliable support behind him, Chen Li only smiled understandingly, gripping the handle of his weapon tighter. A massive battle rages around him, where his loyal men bravely hold back the onslaught of superior enemy forces. Realizing that the battle is dragging on, the young man asks the forest girl to entrust the fate of this confrontation only to him. Now it's time for the main showdown. The monster leader and Chen Li come face to face, ready to crush each other. At this fateful moment, the image of the one for whose smile he is ready to walk through any flame appears before his mind's eye. The battle rages with renewed vigor, and the earth trembles under the heavy steps of a giant thirsty for blood. Chen Li steps forward, reminding the fearsome monster of the sad fate of his kin who fell at his hands. The hero's gaze becomes cold and focused, because the survival of all his loved ones is at stake. The enraged leader, with a wild roar, rushes into the attack, trying to crush the insolent man with one powerful blow. Our hero skillfully dodges the crushing attack, forcing his opponent to merely cut through empty space. But the monster's fury only grows, turning each subsequent swing into a deadly hurricane. Another blow comes down from above with incredible speed, causing the ground to literally disappear from under Chen Li's feet. The guy understands that it will be extremely difficult to defeat this giant in a normal fight. The situation is complicated by the fact that due to the proximity of his allies, he cannot unleash the full destructive power of the legendary Pangu axe. A moment's hesitation nearly costs him his life when the enraged enemy strikes him with a lightning-fast attack. The monster's heavy fist connects with its target, sending Chen Li flying backwards and forcing him to bear the full brunt of the blow. The mutilated creature lets out a shrill, deafening roar, trying to suppress the will of its opponent. But there is no hint of fear in Chen Li's eyes, only the cold, calculating gleam of a warrior. Gathering his last strength, he makes a furious lunge, forcing the monster to retreat back. Both opponents break distance, breathing heavily and assessing the damage done. Only thanks to the strength of his special cloak does the crushing blow not break the boy's ribs. However, the monster's sharp claws still manage to deeply slash his forearm. Having tasted someone else's flesh, the mad beast greedily licks the scarlet blood. This sinister nectar awakens a primal, uncontrollable rage deep within his being. The creature's muscles bulge, and its claws fill with deadly force, ready to tear flesh to pieces. The ground trembles as the monster, warped by murderous lust, unleashes a powerful wave of pressure. The next moment it takes off, turning into a swift, blurry shadow. A clawed paw whistles through the air, missing its target just a hair's breadth away. Chen Li barely manages to dodge, feeling death literally breathing in his face. A monstrous throw hits the protective cloak, which is torn to shreds in the teeth of a ferocious enemy. The boy realizes with horror that the monster's strength and speed have increased many times over, but for some reason, it hesitates to attack again. Instead of continuing the fight, the pack of creatures suddenly rushes away, as if obeying some other call. Looking back, Chen Li was met with the gaze of a stern warrior who had suddenly found himself in the very epicenter of the chaos. A tight ring of merciless amphibians is already closing around the stranger. This fearless fighter in a bone helmet prepares to take on an unequal fight alone. And now, Chen Li must decide whether he is willing to shed even more blood to save a random ally. The advancing creatures, driven by primal hunger, thirst for only one thing: fresh flesh. Chen Li knows very well, these monsters are like sharks whose minds completely shut down at the sight of someone else's blood. Realizing the danger of the situation, he quickly formulates a crazy, but the only working plan in his mind. At that moment, a young native runs up to him, ready to bravely throw himself into the very heat for the sake of his leader. But Chen Li stops the brave fool, realizing that in this massacre, the boy will die in the first seconds. The young man's face is frozen in bewilderment, because he so sincerely wanted to prove his devotion. Our hero gives a clear order, his gaze directed to where the outcome of this battle must be decided. There is no fear in his eyes, only the cold calculation of a man accustomed to surviving despite any circumstances. The first thing he does is order his ally to immediately take all the wounded away from the battle zone. Meanwhile, his fellow tribesmen bring what will become the main weapon in his cunning trap. Pointing to the riverbank, Chen Li orders the live bait to be released straight towards the enemies. The squealing pigs rush forward, raising clouds of dust before the astonished monsters. Signaling to his ally hiding in a tree, Chen Li coordinates a perfectly aimed strike. Sharp spears pierce the target, instantly staining the ground with the bait's scarlet blood. And this alluring smell instantly spreads across the entire battlefield, causing enemies to freeze. The gaze of the ferocious monsters is immediately drawn to the easy and much-desired prey. A furious roar fills the air as primal instincts take over the aquatic creatures' minds. Forgetting about people, the monsters, maddened by thirst, rush forward, sweeping away everything in their path. A crowd of creatures grapple in a furious fight for a piece of meat, completely blinded by the smell of fresh blood. And while the enemies are tearing each other apart, Chen Li gives the command to attack the hesitant predators. His warriors instantly respond to the call, ready to follow their leader to the end. However, a sudden cry from the top of the tree makes Chen Li turn around abruptly. It turns out the poisonous bait worked even faster than they could have imagined. The attackers fall to the ground in an instant, shaking in powerless convulsions. The locals look at the defeated monsters in bewilderment, not understanding how this is possible. Did the cunning plan with the poison meat really work so cleanly and mercilessly? Dozens of formidable predators now lie motionless, completely neutralized by a cunning trick. The hunters freeze in indecision, afraid to take even a step towards the silent horde. There's only one question spinning around in Chen Li's head: what kind of madness just happened here? But it soon becomes clear. The monsters are not dead, but only deeply sedated by the poison. The image of that very mysterious warrior, whose trail they had been searching for so long, appears before their mind's eye. Soon, the captive creatures are placed in sturdy wooden cages under the strict supervision of guards. Patrol commanders are demanding extreme vigilance from their subordinates, as these creatures are still dangerous. The leader herself looks at the prisoners with contempt, not hiding her disgust for the monsters. But one of the guards notices something strange in the behavior of the locked creature. The girl's serious gaze turns to her subordinate, sensing something is wrong. The prisoner desperately clings to the bars, begging for mercy. Having assessed the situation, the warrior decides to deliver the valuable loot directly to the camp. On their way to the settlement, Chen Li and his squad finally come face to face with the local defenders. As he passes the cells, he hears only the pitiful groans of once formidable enemies begging for a drop of water. A companion informs Chen Li that one of the strongest captives has finally regained consciousness but is being kept under special surveillance. Chen Li slowly approaches the massive cage, holding the treasured vessel with cool liquid in his hands. Without saying a word, he uncorks the flask right before the eyes of the thirsty monster. As if testing his will, he pours water in a thin stream directly into the captive's open mouth, forcing him to greedily swallow every drop. But the unfortunate man barely has time to feel relief when Chen Li abruptly puts the flask back. There is not a drop of compassion on his face, only the cold, calculating interest of a leader thirsting for answers. Realizing that the saving source has dried up, the prisoner looks at it with undisguised despair and silent prayer. Seeing this brutal scene, the blonde companion decides to intervene, suggesting a more gentle approach to the interrogation. She timidly approaches the bars, trying to show that she has no evil intentions. With genuine kindness, the girl allows the exhausted warrior to drink his fill straight from her hands. A soft, disarming smile blossoms on her face, designed to melt the ice of hostility. The beast, not expecting such mercy, freezes, looking distrustfully at its savior. And then she carefully asks him to answer a few simple questions as a token of gratitude for his help. However, the captured warrior only smiles bitterly, reminding them that they were the first to break into his lands with weapons in their hands. The enemy's words hurt the girl deeply, making her doubt the correctness of their actions. Watching from the side, Chen Li only sighed skeptically, remembering the mountain tribe's bad reputation. Noticing the prisoner's strange reaction, the girl asks in bewilderment whether he really belongs to this people. But this question only further confuses the giant, who looks at his captors in surprise. The sudden realization leaves everyone present frozen in shock. It seems they have made a fatal mistake. After all, this formidable warrior had never even heard of those whom they were so desperately trying to find in these parts. The prisoner only sullenly lowers his head, realizing that he has been mistaken for someone else. The girl sighs heavily, realizing that their long search has once again reached a dead end. After all, the memories of those nightmarish raids of ferocious monsters are still alive in her memory, when a whole army of merciless creatures held all the surrounding lands in fear. But the giant, locked in a cage, furiously protests, assuring that he has nothing to do with those atrocities. His former belligerence gives way to confusion and a lack of understanding of what is happening. Curious about his reaction, Chen Li and his companion ask the captive to tell his story. And then, tightly gripping the bars, he begins to talk about the tragedy of his people. Once upon a time, his tribe lived peacefully on a distant coast, sharing their catch and enjoying simpler days. Their biggest worries were the petty fights between tribesmen who were not sharing the spoils. As a leader, he easily resolved any disputes, instilling confidence and calm in his fellow dogs. But one day this fragile peace was destroyed by the desperate cry of a fellow tribesman who came running. Having lifted the frightened child, the leader tried to understand the reason for his sincere tears. A trembling finger pointed towards the jungle, where a previously unknown threat emanated. On the border of their domains, the silhouettes of strangers appeared, led by a colossal giant. It was a wild tribe of ruthless barbarians who came with only one purpose: to destroy. Trying to protect his lands, the leader blocked their path, demanding that they leave immediately. However, the leader of the invaders only silently raised his hand, calling his army to action. The next moment, his palm suddenly dropped down, giving a merciless order. And the enraged crowd of savages rushed forward with a deafening roar, leaving no chance for salvation. The enraged leader of the sea creatures could not believe his ears when he heard about the devastating attack. Finding himself locked in a strong wooden cage, he lost all hope of salvation. But even in captivity, his rage did not subside, breaking out in front of his surprised ally. Chen Li watched this scene thoughtfully, trying to piece together the facts he knew. The prisoner's simple words made him seriously doubt what was happening. The young man stated outright that he had personally explored the deserted sealands and had not found a single living soul there. This news shook the monster to the depths of his soul, causing him to howl in unbearable realization. Realizing the full gravity of the tragedy, the prisoner cried out in despair at his own helplessness. From his weakened claws, a tiny, mysterious object slid silently to the ground. The girl immediately rushed to pick up the fallen find, not understanding its true meaning. She handed the strange, leaf-like flower to Chen Li, admitting that she had never seen such a plant before. After activating the system ability, Chen Li focused on analyzing the artifact to uncover its secret. Meanwhile, the tribe's stern warriors continued to tighten the ring of guards around the captive monsters. But the mysterious, hooded warrior only silently watched the actions of the stranger. As she passed by, she dropped a short phrase, clearly hiding from him the important secrets of these places. Chen Li was left alone with his thoughts, carefully clutching the strange crimson leaves in his palm. Every detail of this discovery indicated that something far more powerful was behind the raid. A frightening picture of a conspiracy that had engulfed these lands began to form before the hero's eyes. In the depths of dark caves, an ancient monster with glowing scarlet eyes accepted the worship of its faithful servants. It was this terrible Lord of Darkness who left mortal wounds on the bodies of the defeated sea warriors, leaving them no chance. But Chen Li had no intention of backing down in the face of this threat, feeling the tension literally freeze in the air. He tried to comprehend what he had seen, gazing into the crimson sunset, which only foreshadowed new trials. The fallen warriors of the depths, once proud and invincible, now languished in captivity, deprived of their former strength. Their quiet, barely audible whispers were full of despair and fear of a cruel fate. Chen Li felt a strong sense of the shadow of an invisible giant looming over them, ready to crush anyone who dared to resist. Approaching one of the cages, the young man looked at the captive monster, trying to understand the true nature of its weakness. At that moment, a mysterious system board flashed right in the air in front of him, causing those around him to freeze in surprise. After carefully examining his meager stats, Chen Li only frowned. His current strength was clearly insufficient for an open confrontation. The beastwoman standing nearby told them with alarm in her voice how exactly the enemies had managed to capture such powerful creatures. The guy listened to her silently, instantly assessing the scale of the threat looming over them. A spark of hope flashed in the girl's eyes, because this strange young man seemed to be the only one who did not succumb to panic. Then Chen Li showed her a special crimson leaf that the invaders used to control the minds of their slaves. He looked closely at this fragile but incredibly dangerous weapon, trying to figure out how to turn its properties to his advantage. The Sea People warrior, locked in a cage, only remained sullenly silent, having long since resigned himself to his miserable fate. But Chen Li stepped forward resolutely, intending to conduct a dangerous but necessary experiment. He explained to the prisoner that even the most resilient body was powerless against the paralyzing fumes of this plant. With these words, the young man handed him a small piece of leaf right through the bamboo rods. Mixing fear with curiosity, the sea warrior carefully inhaled the pungent aroma of the offered medicine. At that very moment, a wild flash of pain pierced his mind, causing the poor fellow to clutch his head. The stupefying shackles began to rapidly fall from his consciousness, returning his ability to think and awakening his rage. Chen Li shows the prisoner a rare plant, explaining how the poison has been clouding their minds all this time. The truth stuns the captive beast, causing him to shudder with sudden realization. Realizing the horror of his situation, the leader begs Chen Li to allow them to join the coming battle. There is an unquenchable fire burning in his eyes, a thirst for revenge for the humiliation he suffered, which will not subside until the end of his days. This call is taken up by the other captives, calling on the strength of their so-called king. Dozens of clawed hands reach through the bars, begging for just one chance to get even with their enemies. However, Chen Li is in no hurry to give in to their passionate impulse. He carefully assesses the condition of those who, just a moment ago, were spineless cattle. The young man says directly that it is their uncontrolled emotions that cause him the greatest concern. As soon as they are released and smell fresh blood, their ancient instincts will take over again. Will they be able to contain their primal rage and avoid turning into maddened beasts in the midst of the chaos of battle? Chen Li asks this harsh question straight to their leader's face, demanding complete honesty. The savior's icy tone instantly sobers up the heated fighter. The awareness of one's own vulnerability falls heavily on the shoulders of the captured warrior. Chen Li is adamant, without iron discipline, they are not destined to win this war. Having humbled his pride, the leader looks devotedly at the man who holds their fate in his hands. And then the young man puts forward his tough but fair condition. The prisoner held his breath, realizing that the future of his entire tribe was being decided. A barely noticeable, confident smile plays on Chenli's lips, like that of a leader who has calculated everything in advance. Without another moment's hesitation, the leader gives his unconditional consent, ready to submit to any of his will. The captured beastmen, locked in wooden cages, are filled with determination and a thirst for revenge. Chenli's allies watch with undisguised respect as his authority among the savages grows rapidly. Step by step, he confidently walks past the bars, catching glances full of hope and awe. The flame of unyielding will burns in the young man's eyes because now he has a powerful army ready to go to the end. With a simple gesture, Chenli declares yesterday's captives his new comrades, erasing the boundaries of previous enmity. It was time to strengthen his position, and the mysterious system interface unfolded before his eyes once again. Assessing the scale of the upcoming changes, the guy involuntarily lets out a sigh of relief, realizing the full weight of the leader's burden. The system insistently demands that you distribute your accumulated attribute points, offering you to make a decisive choice. Chenli's gaze flashes with excitement. He understands perfectly well what exactly he should direct his newfound power towards. He remembers the mad savage whose wild strength still makes his heart beat faster, spurring him on to become stronger. The decision is made, and at the same moment his body is pierced by blinding streams of primordial energy. A powerful upward stream of light literally tears apart the space around him as the accumulated power rushes into his veins. Chenli barely holds back the scream that is trying to escape as he goes through the painful but necessary transformation. When the glow fades, his renewed body radiates colossal power, surpassing any human limits. The guy looks at his grown-out hair with slight bewilderment, an unexpected side effect of such a rapid transformation. But the system is not going to stop and opens up access to valuable rewards accumulated in the inventory. A massive treasure chest spills out a ton of pure hematite, a priceless raw material for a new era. This gift of fate makes Chenli seriously think about a grand technological leap for his tribe. Metallurgy formulas instantly pop into his head because now he knows how to smelt iron and create a real weapon. Armed with the power of science and boundless knowledge, he is ready to lead the savages to the greatness of a new civilization. The system presents him with new gifts, hidden under a veil of secrecy. The next reward turns out to be unusually useful, free vials of a powerful healing potion. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, because this time Chenli receives something much more valuable than simple resources. A mysterious ancient slab materializes before him, containing sacred knowledge. Strange symbols carved into the stone seem to be the key to a new stage of evolution. The young man tries to understand what aspect of human culture this relic represents. He anticipates a great discovery that will instantly change the minds of his wild fellow tribesmen. Suddenly, the artifact illuminates everything around with a blinding flash of primordial light. The system alert shocks Chenli. The slab has given his people a basic sense of shame. Realizing the value of this gift makes him think about the standards of decency and morality. After all, now the savages will have to cover their nakedness, saving the leader from very awkward situations. When the light goes out, the artifact disappears without a trace, leaving Chenli alone with his thoughts. However, everyday issues have to be put aside because the menacing shadow of hostile neighbors still hangs over the tribe. He is pulled out of his thoughts by the approach of his faithful comrade, rushing to share news. Chenli greets the girl warmly, ready to listen to her concerns. But instead of serious conversations, she points out changes in her own body with childish spontaneity. Rising on tiptoe, she naively expects simple answers from her leader. Changing the subject, she loyally offers herself as an ambassador, ready to settle the conflict peacefully. But Chenli understands perfectly well that bloodthirsty enemies cannot be stopped by simple persuasion. This conflict has been brewing for too long, and now only force of arms will decide the fate of his nascent empire. The people of his tribe are terrified of the coming storm, not knowing how to protect themselves from the ruthless invaders. Even among the closest allies, tension is mounting, and fear is gradually paralyzing their will. But Chenli isn't just waiting for the blow. There's no sign of panic in his eyes. He understands that the newly arrived tribesmen must be kept busy immediately, before despondency destroys the fragile unity. It's time to use all available resources and distribute responsibilities among residents. Of course, simple savages do not initially understand the subtleties of military strategy and cunning tricks. However, Chenli patiently explains to them how important it is to strengthen and secure the borders of their lands. After all, if the Sea Tribe decides to raid again, they must face an impenetrable wall of defense. The experience accumulated during their travels results in the creation of ingenious traps, nets, and deadly ditches. Listening to his confident speeches, his comrades look at their leader with sincere admiration and hope. The settlement begins to rapidly transform, turning from a defenseless camp into a temporary fortress. The fire of hope is lit in the hearts of people, ready to unite in the face of a mortal threat. Even yesterday's wild warriors are now working hard for the good of the common home. They adapt surprisingly quickly to peaceful life and stocking up on provisions for future expeditions. In the midst of this commotion, one of his most loyal and powerful companions rushes to Chen Li. The faithful warrior is sincerely happy to meet him, amazed at how much his master has changed and matured. But there is no time for idle talk. Chen Li immediately moves on to a discussion of military tactics. Right on the ground, he draws a detailed diagram of the location of hidden ambushes that will catch the enemy off guard. His unwavering determination and sharp mind leave even seasoned veterans breathless. And although some details of the plan cause slight confusion among the warriors, they are ready to follow their king without complaint to the very end. One of the loyal commanders cannot hide his amazement at what he heard. Chen Li tapped his helmet encouragingly with a slight smile, urging him to cast aside all doubts. There is absolute confidence in his eyes, a quality that only true leaders possess. Time after time, he draws secret diagrams on the ground, revealing strategic points of defense. Realizing the genius of the plan, the giant obediently bows his head in complete agreement. Each warrior has a unique and irreplaceable role to play in the coming confrontation. And even though mortal danger awaits them ahead, this gesture instills unshakable faith in their hearts. After all, even the strongest fighters sometimes need a simple word of support. A friendly pat on the shoulder dispels the last remnants of anxiety. However, somewhere there, in the darkness of the wild forests, alien eyes, full of madness, are already watching them closely. The camp gates are ready to meet any threat, sealing the familiar peace. But nature has its own laws, and soon something completely mysterious appears before them. An ancient monument with strange inscriptions rises from the ground with a heady rumble. This mysterious artifact makes Chen Li fall into deep thought for a moment. But now is not the time to unravel ancient mysteries, for current affairs require immediate solutions. Leaving clear instructions to his loyal guards for the end, the young man finally decides to give himself a break. A secluded refuge awaits him, safely hidden from prying eyes. Having thrown off the burden of responsibility, Chen Li sank down onto the soft bed, exhausted. In the silence of the room, staring into space, he tries to collect his thoughts before the new day. After all, tomorrow he will have to solve insurmountable tasks, strengthen the borders, train the army, and lead his people to absolute greatness. Fatigue takes its toll, and Chen Li finally closes his eyes, plunging into a long-awaited, deep sleep. In his mind, exhausted by endless battles, disturbing thoughts slowly dissolve. But instead of nightmares, something completely unexpected suddenly appears before his inner gaze. He finds himself in a bright, cozy hall where beautiful companions greet him with smiles. The gentle touch instantly makes the stern warrior hold his breath in embarrassment. Charming girls invite him to forget about past troubles and finally relax. Chen Li decides to give in to this temptation because, after so many battles, he deserves a little warmth. Laughter, fun, and intoxicating drinks make his head spin, taking away all his past worries. In this crazy dream, he is ready to scream with happiness, celebrating his deliverance from eternal fear. The feeling of complete freedom and triumph seems so real that it demands to continue this fun. But the morning rays, breaking through the curtains, mercilessly bring him back to reality. The sleepy bliss still holds him in its sweet embrace, promising a wonderful awakening. Through half-open eyelids, he sees the silhouette of her who is tenderly leaning over him in the glow of dawn. A happy smile lights up Chen Li's face as he tries to guess the name of his mysterious guest. But reality delivers a crushing blow in the form of the stern face of his loyal bully in a ridiculous mask. The realization of what was happening instantly erases all traces of romanticism from the leader's face. A chilling scream of horror fills the entire room, driving away the remnants of sleep without a trace. It turns out that the loyal subordinate only literally carried out yesterday's order to appear before his master at dawn. The embarrassed giant is genuinely perplexed as to why his appearance has caused such a violent reaction. And, while the witnesses of this scene hastily retreat, Chen Li understands that this day will begin with complete chaos. Preparation begins with the basics. Dig a deep hole and strew its bottom with sharp, deadly stakes. Any careless step by the enemy in the dark will turn this simple trap into a death sentence. Chen Li personally shows his allies how to skillfully disguise a trap using ordinary leaves. Just a couple of movements, and the mortal danger disappears under a harmless green carpet. His fellow tribesmen sincerely admire his wisdom, because for them, these simple tactical techniques seem to be the pinnacle of military art. Even the most hesitant of them are willing to learn, realizing that the survival of the entire tribe is at stake. Chen Li suggests using old training targets to create more sophisticated mechanisms. By replacing the heavy log with a strong net, you can create the perfect device for capturing prisoners without unnecessary bloodshed. The warriors enthusiastically accept his instructions, ready to immediately put the design into practice. They assure their leader that they will handle all the preparations to the best of their ability and will not let him down. Chen Li leaves them to work, while the tired defenders dream of quickly finishing their business and returning to a long-awaited rest. Meanwhile, the first rays of dawn paint the sky in soft tones, illuminating the sleepy camp where life is just beginning to awaken. Having made sure that the external defenses are in place, the young man decides to check how things are going in the settlement itself. His leisurely steps lead to one of the huts, from where strange, muffled sounds are heard. Unaware of anything, Chen Li confidently swings open the heavy wooden door. But what he sees inside instantly makes him recoil in utter confusion and shock. The inhabitants of the hut, caught off guard, freeze in fear, not knowing where to hide from the unexpected visit. The girl's cheeks instantly flushed a deep blush from such an awkward and sudden intrusion. Chen Li looks away in embarrassment, realizing that he has accidentally interrupted the mystery of creating and trying on new outfits. Quickly closing the door, he tactfully gives them half a day to complete the work, trying to smooth over this awkward misunderstanding as quickly as possible. Left outside, Chen Li warns those hiding inside that they had better come out voluntarily. Step by step, he approaches the modest hut, but his gaze catches on something strange. Right at the entrance, there is a stone slab covered with mysterious ancient writings. Before he has time to read the symbols, an alarming cry cuts through the silence of the forest. A breathless Shigu runs towards him at full speed, bearing bad news. In his massive palms, the faithful comrade holds two nondescript gray fragments. He holds them forward, trying to explain the importance of this unexpected find. As soon as the giant hits the stones together, bright sparks fly in all directions. At this moment, excitement flashed in Chen Li's eyes as he instantly understood how to use this discovery. Having realized what was going on, the young man grinned contentedly, because now they had a way to make fire. A daring plan to create a powerful combustible mixture immediately matures in his head. Simple bundles of dynamite can be their most devastating weapon in this wilderness. It only takes one spark to fan the flames of a great revolution or to destroy any obstacle. To put their plan into practice, they set off to the foot of the majestic gray cliffs. Here, under the scorching sun, the local residents are already in full swing at their grueling work. Shigu proudly points to the excavation site, leading Chen Li along with him. The blue-skinned workers are diligently digging for that very rare breed that their leader spoke of. Approaching the edge of a freshly dug deep trench, the heroes assess the scale of the work done. Peering into the dark depths of the pit, Chen Li notices something very unusual beneath the layer of soil. He asks Shiga to go down lower and check the find, sensing that the earth is hiding another ancient secret. Faithful Shigu pulls strange clay lumps from the depths of the pit, trying to unravel their origin. Deciding to test the find in the most reliable, albeit dubious, way, the giant tastes it. A second of realization makes him freeze in mute amazement at this unexpected taste experience. Chen Li, instantly putting the facts together, begins to guess what exactly they stumbled upon underground. The harsh reality hits his pride when he reveals the true purpose of this pit. It turns out that the centuries-old deposits underfoot are nothing more than an ancient public toilet of the former inhabitants of these lands. It now becomes clear that there was once a lair of a wild mountain tribe located here. Suppressing his disgust, Chen Li orders that all traces of their presence in this foul-smelling place be carefully covered up. On the move, he gives valuable instructions on strengthening positions and building signal towers for the garrison. And while Shigu struggles with a sudden attack of nausea, the young leader decides to make a hasty retreat. Meanwhile, the golden sunset spreads over the young settlement, illuminating the first houses being built. Walking among the huts with his faithful companion, Chen Li ponders the future of their new home. He is confident that food, shelter, and security are the unshakable foundation for the greatness of any tribe. But these majestic thoughts are rudely interrupted by the sudden appearance of a local thunderstorm, an insanely strong and loving warrior. In a panic, Chen Li runs away, trying in vain to use his companion as a human shield. But there is no escape from this powerful love. The crushing embrace overtakes the leader in the blink of an eye. The power of her passion is so great that it sweeps away everything in its path, carrying Chen Li into flight. With a deafening crash, one of the newly built huts collapses like a house of cards. The stricken companion rushes to the ruins, sincerely fearing for the life of his ruler after such a ramming attack. Amidst the rubble, the defeated Chen Li only silently begs for mercy, caught in the grip of an irresistible feminine tenderness. Through her tears, she presses him to her with such force that the ruler's bones begin to creak ominously. With difficulty breaking free from this crushing embrace, Chen Li tries to comprehend the astonishing news of the completion of construction. Using the language of simple numbers and drawings, the girl rushes to prove that they now have a reliable shelter for all their fellow tribesmen. Indeed, nearby, the tribe's new allies are hard at work rebuilding their destroyed homes. Touched by such care, Chen Li gently pats the warrior on the head, promising to return in a couple of days. Finally, with a slight smile, he orders her to tidy up the building that suffered from her violent emotions. As he leaves, the leader tries to maintain his dignity, although his back is literally splitting after such close contact with feminine power. From the top of the hill, a stunning view opens up. Life in these lands is finally beginning to return to a peaceful course. Descending to the water, Chen Li and his faithful companion observe the coordinated work of the transformed tribe. The former wild warriors now proudly boast to each other about their rich river catch. The shore is bustling with life as women dry fish, stockpiling supplies for future prosperity. Looking at this piece, Chen Li understands that all the efforts he had made were not in vain. The simple fruits of their labor, drying in the rays of the sunset, now seem more valuable than any gold. The comrade sincerely admires the leader, admitting that this miracle happened only thanks to his steady hand. But behind the leader's mask of calm lies the deep concentration of a man who knows the true value of peace. The companion assures that with such a ruler, they no longer fear the threat of total extermination. Chen Li only listens to these words in silence, realizing how great the responsibility for every life entrusted to him is. After all, in this harsh world where the strongest survives, peace is only a short respite before a new storm. Noticing the master's thoughtful look, the warrior silently wonders what other trials they must go through. And those for whom Chen Li is ready to challenge fate itself continue to enjoy simple earthly blessings. A squad of beastmen stubbornly climbs up the rocky slope, preparing for hard work. However, the appearance of Chen Li makes their leader bow respectfully before his lord. Hastily descending to meet them, the warrior rushes to report on the current state of affairs in the camp. As the sunset fades, they discuss plans to strengthen the borders, but some details make Chen Li uneasy. The situation is becoming dire. There is a catastrophic shortage of workers, and time for constructing defenses is rapidly running out. We need to complete key posts in the mountains before the pitch darkness of night falls on the earth. Assessing the meager strength of his men, Chen Li understands that hesitation at such a moment is tantamount to death. Not wanting to be left on the sidelines, he offers to take on the job personally, despite the timid objections of the devoted warrior. There is no more time for unnecessary thoughts and empty ceremonies. Now every second counts. After all, if the enemy catches them by surprise in this narrow gorge, the consequences will be catastrophic. The ruthless savages will not miss the opportunity to strike at lines that are not prepared for defense. As night falls, Chen Li, alongside his allies, begins to set up defensive barriers. He sighed heavily and cast a fleeting glance at the distant peak where the signal tower stood. His amber eyes reflect an unwavering determination to see things through to the end, no matter the cost. By tightly tying the knots on the support pillars, the young man puts all his strength into strengthening these fragile boundaries. But suddenly, the silence of the sleeping forest is broken by a piercing, chilling cry of alarm. Chen Li's heart skips a beat, and his warrior instincts instantly make him prepare for the worst. Turning towards the sound, he notices with horror a column of smoke rising from the signal tower of the northern mountain. Anger and fury flash in his gaze. The enemy made his move much earlier than they expected. Without wasting a moment, Chen Li takes off and rushes towards the inevitable battle. The road to the South Mountain is not short, but every second is worth its weight in gold now. Chen Li is well aware of how high the stakes are, and grits his teeth as the tension mounts. Meanwhile, at the top of the signal post, a small lookout is desperately trying to warn his own. Looking into the endless expanses of the forest, he understands that trouble is already on the doorstep. Anxiety grips his heart with an icy grip, forcing him to act without delay. Fearing that enemies who have noticed the smoke are already prowling nearby, he rushes down the slope. Descending from the cliff, he is prepared for the worst and clutches his simple weapon tightly. He rushes through the forest thicket, hoping to make it in time. But a sudden whistle of wind makes him abruptly turn to the side. Frozen in place, he peers warily into the dangerous semi-darkness of the forest. At that very moment, a deadly blast of energy cuts through the air, aiming straight at him. Only a miracle saves him from certain death. Someone's powerful weapon takes the blow. A swift silhouette rushes past, leaving no time to even comprehend what is happening. The lookout barely manages to shield himself with his hands from the rising whirlwind of dust and wood chips. A huge, menacing blade freezes inches from his face. Chen Li himself appears before him, whose stern appearance instantly dispels fear and replaces it with amazement. Lowering his formidable weapon, the warrior immediately gets down to business, asking about the traps that were triggered. The time for long conversations has passed, and Chen Li decides to personally lead this dangerous confrontation. Having given the order to wait for reinforcements and send them after him, he quickly disappears among the trees. The little warrior can only follow his leader with his eyes, believing in his strength and preparing to fulfill his duty. As Chen Li quickly makes his way through the dense undergrowth of a night forest, he ignores the warnings. Under the cold light of the full moon, a strange silhouette appears before his eyes, silently swaying on a thick tree branch. Approaching carefully, the young man tries to make out the mysterious captive in the darkness of the night. The figure is securely bound with ropes, and its awkward pose only raises more questions. Slowly drawing his weapon, Chen Li prepared for any trap this mysterious forest might have in store for him. But imagine his surprise when he recognizes Xiao Wang in the helpless captive, suspended in an extremely ambiguous position. The unexpected sight makes the hero instantly embarrassed, depriving him of his usual composure. The girl herself is burning with shame and rage, ready to incinerate the uninvited savior with just one glance. Confusion quickly turns to anger when she notices his intense, shocked gaze. Realizing the comical nature of the situation, Chen Li takes the opportunity to tease the formidable warrior, causing a storm of indignation in her. In response to her furious screams, the guy only smirks, demonstratively grabbing her tied leg. The brazen gesture goes even further when his gloved fingers begin to slowly tickle her bare foot. From the surprise and tickling, the girl's reserved image instantly collapses, replaced by an involuntary sigh. Trying to preserve the remnants of his pride, Xiaowang continues to make threats, demanding that this bullying stop immediately. The fun is interrupted by a sudden rustling in the bushes, causing Chen Li to instantly become wary. Realizing that the time for jokes is over, the heroes try to quickly navigate the impending danger. The young man quickly begins to untie the complex knots before the enemies take them by surprise. A squad of pursuers, led by a menacing masked warrior, silently appears from the forest thicket. The little animal in wolfskin grins resolutely, ready to attack at any moment. However, the absurd scene that appears before them leaves even these stern forest hunters speechless for a moment. This ridiculous masked warrior freezes in complete bewilderment, not knowing how to react to what is happening. Chen Li only chuckles awkwardly, trying to smooth over the silence that follows, while his companion looks away in embarrassment. Overcoming her shame, the forest maiden finally decides to explain the motives for her strange actions. Under the glow of the full moon, Chen Li admits his wrongdoing, ready to hear the whole truth. She tells how she accidentally overheard a conversation between strangers from a sea tribe. That evening, these fierce warriors of the ocean seemed to be deeply troubled by something. Their stern faces betrayed an anxiety that was becoming increasingly difficult to hide. Chen Li mentally tries to put together what he heard, suspecting something is wrong. The strangers were afraid of the wild jackals that infested the banks and cut them off from their usual fishing spots. That is why the elf decided to find a new, safe route for them at all costs. However, Chen Li's reaction to this story turns out to be completely unexpected for her. With a slight grin, he suggests solving the problem in the most radical and merciless way. His gaze instantly becomes cold and calculating, revealing him to be a natural tactician. With a gesture of his hand, he calms the worried girl, showing that everything is under control. He had already come up with a brilliant, albeit slightly comical plan for obtaining food. At dawn, Chen Li is determined to deal with this threat personally. Now their common goal is to rid these lands of these insolent predators forever. The guy smiles mischievously, as if the upcoming fight with a pack of animals is just a fun activity for him. His companion playfully puts his excessive self-confidence to rest, bringing him back to reality. And yet, as they make their way through the night thicket, they both understand that a serious test lies ahead. The danger is near. The mountain tribe has launched an offensive, trapping their allies right at the coast. The enemy is cunning and merciless, and the cost of any mistake in this wilderness will be too high. The location of the camp, the mountains, and the beach creates a trap in which any wrong move can be fatal. Gathering everyone in one place means exposing yourself to one crushing blow or deadly poison. Having accepted this risk, they agree to split up because there is simply no other way to save people. While the others take refuge in the shadows of the forest, preparing for the worst, our heroes move forward. Chen-Li assembles a squad of half-human fish ready to comb the dangerous thickets. The guides lead him through the darkness of the night, sharing their fears and forebodings. The air is filled with an ominous silence, through which a barely noticeable, frightening smell can be barely detected. One of the warriors freezes, peering into the dense undergrowth with growing concern. A sudden rustle in the bushes makes everyone instantly prepare for battle. A terrifying, hungry creature emerges from the darkness with a furious roar, thirsting for fresh flesh. But the faithful ally reacts instantly, blocking the monster's path with his mighty chest. With one powerful blow, he intercepts the rushing monster right in the air. With furious force, the giant throws the predator away, forcing it to crash into the centuries-old tree trunks. The giant's victorious roar fills the thicket, but it is too early to relax. From the darkness, attracted by the noise, dozens of glowing, hungry eyes begin to gather. Surrounded by superior enemy forces, the warriors stand frozen, awaiting the order of their leader. Chen-Li just smiled in anticipation, because this was exactly the kind of battle he was waiting for. The loyal giant flexes his fists, offering his king the opportunity to personally deal with those who decide to approach from the left. And the battle begins instantly. A mighty blow from the giant sends the first attacking animals into a deep knockout. For Chen-Li, these wild creatures are nothing more than an annoying nuisance that can be dealt with in passing. However, new monsters continue to arrive, filling the night forest with furious roars and rushing straight at people. But the well-coordinated team acts without delay, stopping any attempt to attack their leader. Heavy fists crush the skulls of monsters, causing them to choke on their own rage. One of the creatures, blinded by bloodlust, makes a desperate leap straight at Chen-Li. Without even flinching, the guy calmly faces the danger. His strong hand instantly closes around the throat of the flying predator, interrupting its angry roar. He looks into the monster's eyes with a contemptuous grin, reminding him who is really in charge here. A distant howl echoes across the dark mountain ranges, heralding the flight of the surviving predators. Seeing the superiority of the uninvited guests, the remnants of the pack scatter in panic into the depths of the thicket. The lifeless body of the last attacker falls to the ground like unwanted trash. Having assessed the situation, Chen-Li decides not to waste precious time and orders them to move on. The great ally agrees, but urges everyone to remain extremely vigilant in these dangerous lands. The small detachment continues its journey under cover of night, delving into unknown territory. Soon they reach the coast, where a majestic and inaccessible cliff appears before their eyes. Chen-Li immediately appreciates the tactical advantage of this place and declares his intention to build a reliable fortress here. The giant bows before the strategic genius of his king, ready to unquestioningly carry out any of his orders. The young ruler promises to send reinforcements for the construction, realizing how important this outpost is. But a sudden premonition makes Chen-Li wary, foreshadowing a new test. Work is in full swing at the construction site, although the builders are visibly nervous about the tight deadlines. Chen-Li leaves clear instructions in case of unforeseen circumstances, calling on loyal allies to be on guard. Returning to the village, nestled at the foot of the silent mountains, he tries to restore his inner peace. In the semi-darkness of the hut, the chief draws the bowstring with a familiar motion, checking the tension of the weapon before a possible exit. The wood responds with an obedient, elastic creak, giving a feeling of former self-confidence. But the silence of solitude is interrupted by a sudden and alarming report right at the entrance. It turns out that one of the young scouts has just returned from a dangerous expedition to the north. Stumbling from the shock he had experienced, the boy tries to describe what he had to face. He tells in a halting voice how the cold and an unknown horror forced him to turn back halfway. Chen-Li smiles kindly and offers friendly encouragement to the little warrior, trying to spare him from embarrassment. However, the primal fear of the unknown is not so easily dispelled by simple words. Unable to bear the oppressive premonition, even his faithful companion clings to Chen-Li in search of protection. She whispers about the soul-crushing nightmare, barely holding back the tears that are welling up. The girl's quiet confession makes the ruler instantly lose all his leniency and become gloomy. After all, there, behind the snow-capped ridges, something colossal is hidden, a primeval giant, bringing death to all living things.